Good afternoon. Thank you for joining us for today's briefing as we continue to highlight our upcoming shuttle mission, STS-125. We'll begin with some initial remarks from our commander, Scott Altman, who will be making his second mission to the Hubble telescope. Scott will introduce his crew and then make some initial remarks before taking questions from reporters here at Johnson Space Center as well as other NASA centers. Scott?
Thank you very much, Nicole. It really is a pleasure to get to this point in the mission preparation where we spend some time with you all talking about the mission and introducing ourselves. We've been assigned for nearly 2 years now. We got assigned October 31st back in 2006. We've been training full-time for roughly a year since July of last year. So we've had a lot of time to work together to get ready. And over that amount of time, the last 2 years, and especially the last 1 year working full-time getting ready for the mission, I can tell you now we are ready to go. We have more work to do in the last 30 days, but I definitely feel that the crew has come together. Everybody knows their jobs, and we're ready to execute it and looking forward to heading down to the Cape, launching, and getting to work on the telescope. So it really is an honor to be here. And we're thrilled to be at this point in our timeline. I'd like to spend a couple of minutes introducing the crew, and I'll just kind of go down the line. We're in the flight order. So next to me is my pilot, Greg Johnson. He's also a Navy pilot. His call sign is Ray J. If anybody remembers the old commercials, you can figure out where that came from. But he grew up in Seattle, went to the University of Washington, studied aeronautical engineering, and then went to test pilot school, although he did go to Air Force test pilot school out at Edwards versus the Navy test pilot school in Pax River, where I went. And worked for NASA for a while before coming in the class of '98. This is his first flight to space. As the pilot, he backs me up on all the procedures on the flight deck and then assists during the flow of the flight, keeping everything going, making sure the shuttle stays healthy and backing me up. He also is my lead for the IMAX procedures that we're doing, the ICBC, the IMAX 3D movie that'll be made after the flight. So he's a great guy to have on board. Next to him is my MS-1, Mike Good. Mike grew up in Ohio. Went to the University of Notre Dame, where he got both his bachelor's and his master's in aeroengineering, and then joined the Air Force, flying as a flight test engineer and later as a navigator in F-111s before going to, again, Air Force test pilot school. Came out of there, worked a little bit on the B-2, some on the F-15, and joined NASA. This is his first flight in space. Mike is on the flight deck with me for Ascent as one of my mission specialists who help manage all the tasks that we have going uphill and keeping track of malfunctions, keeping us on the timeline. One of the hardest working people on the flight deck, managing all that. And then once we're in orbit, he performs 2 spacewalks, 2 EVAs, going out with Mike Massimino as part of a team with one experienced spacewalker and one new spacewalker. Next to him is my MS-2, Megan MacArthur. Megan grew up in California, studied aeronautical engineering at UCLA before going to the University of California, San Diego, the Scripps Institute of Oceanography, to get her master's and PhD in oceanography. So she balances both oceans, aeronautic as well as the ocean, and is a great asset to have on board as a result. This is her first flight. She is my prime robotics operator during all the EVAs, the person we look to for moving everyone around on the end of the robotic arm, as well as being my MS-2, the flight engineer for Ascent, who follows along through all the procedures and keeps me on and Ray J on track by being the quarterback of everything we do, calling the plays, getting an agreement with Megan that we're headed down the right path, so she doesn't have to motivate us with the swizzle stick that she has there as we're going uphill. Next to her is an old friend from my previous trip to the Hubble, John Grunsfeld, actually making his 5th flight into space. 3 of those, this will be the 3rd trip to visit Hubble. And John is the lead for all of our EVA activity. He's helped put together all the tasks and timelines and worked with that, helped us both training himself and the rest of us in what we're doing and coming up with optimal ways to get things done. He grew up in Chicago, went to the University of went to MIT for his undergraduate, and then came back to Chicago, the University of Chicago, for his graduate degrees in physics and astronomy. He's worked with projects at NASA, flown experiments, and now is basically our lead astronomer on the flight, who has a payload coming for Hubble after the flight, hopefully using the results of his work if we all perform as well as we hope. Next to him is the other veteran from the last flight to Hubble, Mike Massimino. Mike's making his second flight. He grew up in New York, Franklin Square, went to Columbia, and then MIT for his graduate degrees in mechanical engineering. He's making 2 spacewalks this time, leading his team with Mike Good going out the door with him for those. Has worked robotics in our office and also was involved in the robotic Hubble repair mission, and has taken some of the things he learned doing that to make it possible for us to be more efficient in the tasks that we have on this mission. Next to him is Drew Feustel, making his first space flight. Drew grew up in Michigan, went to Purdue, got a degree in geophysics, then got his doctorate from the Queen's University in Canada. He also met a Canadian at Purdue and moved back to Canada with her, and now has brought her to Houston, where he worked for Exxon for a while before coming to NASA to fly. And he'll be doing 3 EVAs along with John Grunsfeld as part of his team. That's our crew. I think you know what we're trying to do to the Hubble from the other briefings that you've received, and I'd like to turn it back over to you all for your questions, and we'll see what you'd like to talk about.
Okay, with that, we'll start with some questions. We'll start on this side. Let's see. Go ahead.
Bill Harwood, CBS News. I guess for John and Mike Massimino, either one, both of you, ACS and STS repairs, we've been told, is pretty complicated. Obviously it is, watching you guys in the tank and the captive fastener captive device and all of that. Can you walk through that with us a little bit and tell us what makes that challenging, what makes that difficult, how it compares, John, perhaps with PCU from the last flight, just in terms of overall complexity? I mean, I'm assuming those are the 2 items we should really focus on in that context.
Sure. Let me talk a little bit about the advanced camera for surveys repair, and then I'll hand the Space Telescope Imaging Spectrometer repair over to Mass. The last mission, STS-109, we had the task, the power control unit, which was changing out a large box that had an enormous number of connectors around the outside. And it was considered new ground for spacewalking for EVA because we'd never done that many connectors in a short timeline where the balance of the telescope relied on us successfully finishing that repair in a short time, i.e. if we weren't successful, we'd lose the telescope. And we talked about that in the framework of heart surgery on Hubble. You know, this was a critical element for the safety of Hubble, and we had to make it work. We trained very hard on that and used standard tools for the most part, practicing over and over and over again until it became somewhat routine. I think the big difference between that repair and what Massimino and I will be doing on this flight with Drew and Mike Good outside is that we're entering a realm where these devices, advanced camera for surveys, ACS and STS, were not meant to be repaired anything like the way that we're doing it. The tools that we've had to develop, a whole new class of tools for spacewalking, a new power tool, a mini power tool we call it, a cutter, a special grid cutter to cut an EMI grid, you know, essentially 12 very sharp knives that, like a guillotine, will cut an aluminum frame, our fastener capture plates, little bits to take out these tiny screws. All of these tools are brand new for spacewalking. In addition, we're going inside of the instruments. Usually you design spacewalking tools and instruments on Hubble or various orbital replacement units on the International Space Station to have large bolts, big handles. You know, you turn a bolt, you pull something out. We're really going inside the instruments, pulling out circuit cards. These areas are very sensitive to electrostatic discharge. You know, if we get a little spark, you know, the whole thing can be over because we'd ruin the instrument. They are working instruments, they just have some failed components. So we're going in and changing out these components. Going through the repair for the advanced camera for surveys, basically I have to cut an electromagnetic grid off. It's kind of like a screen, metal screen. You may have heard about that this morning. Then I have to remove number 4 fasteners, these tiny little torque set screws. I have 32 of those plus a few other screws to remove a cover plate. Then I have to pull 4 circuit cards out. and then we're going to replace that electronics with new electronics. Instead of putting cards back, we're just going to put a big box in and a new power supply. And I'll be doing that with Drew Feustel on EVA 3. Our goal is to finish that complete in one EVA. We have another EVA, part of an EVA on EVA 5 to complete it if we're not all done on EVA 3. The challenge for me, of course, is doing all those tasks, but in addition, the location of the electronics box on ACS is not right in front of me, but it's sort of around a corner. So I'm kind of working, as if I'm underneath the car, trying to, remove some screws that I can't see. And some of the screws, in fact, I can't see. I have to go by feel with a little manual screwdriver. We've practiced this over and over again in a tank. My spacewalking partner, Drew, has practiced over and over again on his vintage Comet. And so, we've tried to make this feel routine. But I would say we're going into our last NBL runs this week and next week. And this repair, different from previous repairs I've done on Hubble anyway, has not yet become routine. I think this is going to be a nail-biter all the way up until we actually do the repair. Everything I've said about the ACS repair applies to the STS repair, and so I'll pass off to Mike Massimino.
Thanks. The thing that strikes me about the STS repair is it's, as John said, different than other things we've done. We generally take a big instrument out and put a big replacement instrument to do work. And now we're trying to fix an instrument in place. And when they first talked about doing this a couple of years ago, removing 117 non-captive fasteners, many of them with tiny washers inside as well, is a lot of debris. And knowing when we trained for 109 and the history of working on a telescope, where you can't afford to have anything get loose or any debris or a speck of anything, to think about that and then say, well, now we're going to remove all these fasteners and potentially introduce this debris into the into the F shroud seemed crazy. So it wasn't an option to just remove the fasteners. We had to be able to capture all of them, and we had to do this with a lot of special tools. So I think it's a real tribute to the folks at the Goddard Space Flight Center and the folks here at the Johnson Space Center and the different contractors that we work with around the country who built these instruments to come up with these tools and procedures that we use to be able to do these repairs. And it started, we tried in the pool about 2.5 years ago for the first time in some development runs. And we started saying, this is possible for us to do. They gave us the right tools to use, and they thought about everything that we would need to do. And as over those past 2.5 years leading up to this flight, we've kind of ironed out little changes and how we want to do things and practiced over and over again. For STS, we have a bit of an advantage in that we have an actual trainer that they built for us that maybe some of you might have heard about or saw some of it earlier. But it's a little mock-up of the area that we're going to be working in, and we've spent a lot of time together, all of us inside of that trainer. Drew is going to be the primary IV. He's going to be the primary choreographer leading the checklist, and he and I have our own language really to talk about how we're going to do things, what I need to think about at a certain time, and there's just a lot of steps, and there's a lot of things that can go wrong during that procedure. But together, all of us working as a team and practicing, we're willing that down. We feel pretty confident we're going to be able to do this task and pull it off and get the electronics board replaced. But it's going to be very challenging and a real interesting task, and it's a real privilege to get a chance to train for it and to do it in space.
Okay, our next question, Todd.
Todd Halverson of Florida Today for Scooter and/or John. I'm wondering how much preparation for the STS-400 EVAs you guys have put in, and how dramatic you think it would be if that scenario actually came to be in the unlikely event.
Well, I'll start out with that. I'm sure John has some thoughts he'd like to offer as well, so I'll give him a shot at that. I guess the biggest thing I want to hit is all the work that has been done to make sure we don't get into that scenario. Making sure that we've done better at the tank, fixing the tank, lowering the debris environment, ability to find the damage, and then have repair capability. So if we have some damage, the first thing is not a rescue mission, but repairing it and being able to conduct a nominal mission. Because most of all, we want to spend the time working on the telescope, getting those tasks accomplished. I know if we did get into that very unlikely scenario where another shuttle needed to come to rescue us, we have a way to make it all work. It makes sense. We practiced it in the pool, the choreography of going back and forth between the different orbiters, and it is a viable rescue option, but one that we've tried to drive as far down the line of unlikely scenarios as we could. But it's always good to know that you have a plan that you can step through at each point in the checks. Okay, if this doesn't work, we'll go to that, so we can get all the way down to where we need a rescue vehicle, and I think we're very well prepared for that.
Yeah, I think one of the big advantages we have on this flight, on a Hubble flight, is that we have 4 very experienced spacewalkers, 2 of which are going out for the first time, but have demonstrated in the neutral buoyancy laboratory, they're extremely good qualifications for doing spacewalking. And so, 4/7 of the crew, is already highly trained for spacewalks. And the transfer operations, if we ever did get into a rescue situation, are relatively straightforward compared to anything that we're doing on the Hubble nominal mission. One of the benefits of having an STS-400, other than obvious peace of mind, is that we've been able to get training for Scooter, Ray J, and Megan in the pool in spacesuits. And obviously that's, to cover the unlikely case that we're doing a rescue scenario. But it's given us the opportunity to get them in spacesuits and let them, experience the EVA. Of course, Megan's trained EVA as a mission specialist before, but on the Hubble mock-up, they've been able to get a little bit of time to appreciate, what we've been doing all these months and for almost 2 years training for STS-125. And so we actually, in my opinion, I think we have 7 qualified EVA crew members on board, and that's been kind of fun and different from previous Hubble missions.
Jason Sarah, ABC News for Megan. Megan, robotics is so critical on this mission. Is there any one particular maneuver that you keep practicing in your head over and over?
Probably the maneuver that I practice the most, both in the simulator and in my head, is the grapple, which of course has been done before by folks here at NASA, but it'll be the first time that I'm doing it. So I have an excellent instructor, Linda, who has spent a lot of quality time with me in the simulator, and we practice that scenario over and over again with a completely nominal telescope and a nominal arm, and then we successively degrade both things, and so it makes the problem a little bit harder. So I feel like we're really prepared for that task, but it is the one that I think about the most.
I'm Irene Klotz with Reuters. This is for a non-astronomer among you. Are there any of you that really kind of had to read up about Hubble and kind of learn a little bit about why, why this in this day after Columbia that NASA would be devoting resources and time, energy, money to fixing up this observatory, and I guess just what sort of what sort of mindset you've had about going to see this telescope and work on it.
Ray J, you and Bueno answer that.
I'll take that first. Let's see. Obviously, as astronauts, we are aware of Hubble, and when we give talks to schools, Hubble comes up a lot, so it's something that we are kind of familiar with. I was asked what was my favorite Hubble image, and so I did have to look through a few to decide on that, but I think Hubble has a huge payoff for the science community. It's a pure science mission. A number of discoveries, both the expansion of the universe and then the acceleration of that expansion, are big discoveries that Hubble was documented, and so it's a huge science payoff. So from my perspective, it's well worth the cost and the slight increase in risk, being higher altitude and at the 28.5-degree inclination. Bueno, do you have any other thoughts?
Yeah, I guess as a Air Force Weapons Systems officer, I think I'm highly qualified as a non-astronomer to answer the question. I am an aerospace engineer, though, and I do have a great interest in science and engineering. Let me start out by saying that just as I sit up here with the crew, and I just realize what an honor and a privilege it is to be a part of this crew, and how proud I feel about going up to the Hubble Space Telescope. So I think in the last 2 years I've learned a lot about Hubble. I have had to read up on it. We've made it part of our training to actually learn about the Hubble telescope, how it works, what it means to astronomers and scientists and teachers and students all over the country and all over the world. So I think, like Ray J, I've gained a great deal of appreciation for the telescope as a scientific instrument, and I'm really eager to go up and work on it.
Thank you. Tarek Malik with Space.com and Space News. For Commander Altman, this mission, out of the ones remaining for the shuttle, is, stands out obviously because it's not going to the station. And I'm just curious, with your destination to Hubble coming up, with the prospect of a rescue ship on the pad, I guess how do you keep the crew focused and on task? Knowing that you've got these kind of two different scenarios that could come out from the mission. Thanks.
Well, it's actually been a relatively easy leadership challenge keeping the crew focused. They're a very dedicated group of folks. Everybody wants to excel at what we're doing on there. Everybody feels buy-in for the telescope, that it's worthwhile, that we want to leave it in better condition than it's ever been in before, with more discovery potential, and hopefully with a long life ahead of it so it can continue on doing the same thing. It is easy at times to get distracted by the fact that we're a little different, that everybody else is used to going to station, and sometimes you'd have a brief and they say, well, you'll have to do this because on station, and then you're like, oh wait, you're not going there. So that's kind of nice sometimes to have a different destination, and I think it does help us stay focused. We do understand that we're going to a different destination, and some of the things are a little different than what they may have been for other missions or other training events that we've gone through. But the crew's very focused, and I think will continue to be all through the flight.
Hi, Greg Dobbs with HDNet Television. And as a question to the three of you who have been there before, could you pull this mission off as effectively if none of you had previously visited Hubble?
I guess I'll make a quick statement, and that's no. Hubble has always had someone on the crew, except for the very first servicing mission, someone who'd been to Hubble before and understood how to work with it. And it is its own community. I think we have always benefited from having that knowledge passed down. And I'll let John and Mike see what they think about that.
I think I'll follow up with the same thing. No, but the big difference is today we have a very well-running International Space Station program, and the training program for spacewalking on station is pretty well documented and running, so that if you're going to the space station, we have mock-ups in the neutral buoyancy laboratory you can train on. Hubble is a very different animal, and when Hubble was built, we didn't really know how to make it rugged, and as a telescope, you really can't make it as rugged as we've made the International Space Station. So there's a lot of techniques, a lot of knowledge, procedures, and tools that are unique to Hubble. So I wouldn't say that we couldn't be successful without the experience on the crew, but I would say by loading up the crew with the experience we have, we're leveraging to the best possible extent, the highest possible extent, our probability of success. And I think that's really the motivation for why we're on the crew. There's also a big benefit in terms of training that the three of us are able to help train the crew on a lot of the subtleties and some things not so subtle that the bigger team that doesn't have a Hubble experience, coming from robotics or EVA or elsewhere, may not bring in. That said, we have a lot of folks here at the Johnson Space Center, almost the entire team at the Goddard Space Flight Center, and all around the agency. When Hubble was put back on the manifest like a magnet, it drew experienced people back into the program because we are so thrilled to be able to go up to Hubble and restore some of the systems and put new scientific instruments that will make it really knock your socks off.
I think it was good for John Scooter and I from a standpoint of job security. You never know, so it was nice that they considered that. But I think it's not just us that bring experience, it's also the team around us. If you look at our EVA instructors, for example, Tomas Gonzalez-Torres and Christy Hansen worked STS-109, and the Goddard team has a lot of people coming back from the very first, not even the first servicing mission, but from the deploy mission, who worked Hubble and the EVA procedures that they had in place for all the servicing missions. Ron Sheffield's a guy that helped build the telescope and make it serviceable when it was being built out in California, Lockheed Martin, and he still works with us, and he's been around a while. So there's a lot of great experience on the Hubble team, and it's just a pleasure to be able to work with these people who know so much about the telescope and are so willing to share it. So, and as John says, it's different than most of the training we get when we train in the pool, it's usually station related in most cases. So experience helps, and it's not just us. There's a lot of experience in the team.
Yeah, I would like to close up just by saying that it's not just the experience, though. The rest of the crew, as well as other people who've trained us who hadn't been to Hubble, have brought a new way of looking at things and a lot of insight, and they've been an essential part of getting us ready to go. And the new looks from the folks, I don't want to call them rookies anymore because they've come so far, has also helped and aided us. It has been a total team effort. It's a lot of value added every point along the way.
Can I give an example? Let's think of our RSU test, for example. They've done right sensor units on other flights. And so we've done that before. We're like, all right, we'll probably attack this in the same way. And my friend over here, Drew Feustel, had an idea of maybe we could use a special device to what we call what's the official word for it? We call it a pick stick. But you can grab a rate sensor unit with it and pull it out. And you know, if you just go by the experience you've had, you say, well, we've done it like this 2 other flights. We'll probably do it the same way again. But you know, having people come in, these smart, bright people coming in with these new ideas and experiences has also helped. So I think that's a good point. It's been a nice synergy.
Okay. Next question from Jim.
Yeah, Jim Oberg with NBC, and we know you want to leave your mark on the Hubble, a perfect machine, but you may be the last people to visit it. You might not be if other spacecraft, but are you going to leave any personal mark? I don't mean you're going to tag it with a spray can, but do you have anything like you want to stash something in a corner where it's not going to get away, something personal to commemorate your mission and all of the servicing missions that have made Hubble such a success?
I used to joke that the reason they're sending me back is because I left a critical tool in the telescope, and I'm the only one who knows where it is. You know, I think we all plan to leave our mark, and it's wide field camera 3, cosmic origin spectrograph, RSUs, batteries, fine guidance sensor, and Megan hopes to leave no marks on the telescope with the arm, and a soft capture mechanism that someday some other spacecraft will dock to Hubble with.
Writing for the Highland Park News. Question for John. If you had the opportunity to talk later on to any of the residents of your hometown, what would you like them especially to know about this message, about this mission, kind of like a representation of the general public?
Well, when I was growing up in Highland Park, one of the things that I used to do is to go out exploring in the ravines and along the beaches of Lake Michigan. I think all of that exploration is, you know, part of what makes me an astronaut. And so for the folks who live there on the north side of Chicago, they should go out and explore in their backyards. That's an essential part of life.
Hi, Robert Perelman with collectspace.com. I'll toss this out to anyone or everyone who wants to take it, but we've heard crews have bonded as friends, some as extended families, and considering you're not going to the spacious station, how well prepared are you to spend 11 days together in the tight confines of the shuttle?
Well, as you can see, we all get along really well. I think you can see that just by watching us up here. We're all very comfortable together, and you know, we spent some time together in Alaska doing some training and living in tents together under harsh environment, and it went really well. I thought it went just swimmingly, and we all had a good time. We all learned about each other. We all learned about ourselves, and I think we learned about you know, what to expect from each other in under those conditions. So. I think up to now, I mean, in my mind, this is sort of, I couldn't have asked for a better group of folks to go to space with, and I'm really looking forward to it, and I hope they all feel the same, but I think we have a good relationship, and it gets better every day, so.
Yeah, I just had one comment, and I agree with Drew. I thought our Alaska trip was outstanding and was great bonding. As the social director of the crew, I've had a couple parties at our house that I think went really well with the families, and I think we've bonded extremely well, and I'm looking forward to spending 11 days in a small space with these people. So.
I'll throw in my 2 cents that I agree that our trip to Alaska with the National Outdoor Leadership School was a great learning experience, you know, both as a team and individually to learn about ourselves. But I think we have really bonded as a team and as a crew. And the important thing for you all to know is that we're going to succeed or fail as a team. There are no individual successes, certain instruments or things that are going to go well. And there's no individual failures either. If there's mistakes made, we're going to succeed or fail as a team. And I think we're ready to succeed.
That's a great summary, William. Thanks.
Tracy Watson, USA Today, for the commander, playing off Robert's question. In the unlikely scenario that you have to wait for rescue, how do you think you would weather that period of waiting, and what kind of impacts on your habitation would the power downs have?
There are a lot of impacts by trying to stretch out waiting for a rescue. You don't have as much power on the vehicle. Temperatures drop a little bit. We think they'll still be relatively comfortable, but low 60s to high 50s kind of thing. You want to wear a jacket, maybe a hat at night. And then there's the mental aspect of that. I've thought a lot about some of the other folks who've got in scenarios where they've had to be rescued, like Shackleton in the Arctic, and how he brought all his people through, and then other folks like Scott, who didn't quite make it all the way through. And the good news is we have a huge team of people down here working to make sure everything goes well. And then knowing my team as well as I do, I know everybody will be doing what we can to pull together. We have survival rations on board, so we'll be able to eat pretty well. We'll try and relax. The big thing is we won't have as much to do while we're waiting for them to come, but we'll have some communication with the ground and a chance. I don't know if anybody's bringing card games up with them to play during that period of time. But,
a few surprises.
Yeah. But again, I think the big effort is concentrating to make sure we don't get into that situation. And I feel really good that that is an extremely low likelihood scenario. But if we're there, we can handle it.
Mark?
Thank you, Mark Carreau from the Houston Chronicle. Could a couple of you maybe talk about what the telescope, what you remember it looked like when you left it on the last mission, its condition, and what do you expect this time? Do you think it'll be close to that, or do you expect some weathering, something to give it new character?
Well, you guys go down there.
I've been lucky to see the telescope twice, 1999, 2002. So for me, this will be the largest stretch. We had various briefings before we went up in 99 on the condition of the outside of the telescope. The big surprise was really on STS-82 when they arrived at the telescope and some of the outside insulation had peeled back. They actually put patches on that insulation. And the reason the patches were put on was not because it looked bad, but because its thermal performance was actually degraded, and they could measure that. And subsequently, the folks at the Space Telescope Science Institute and the Goddard Space Flight Center have monitored the condition of the telescope by looking at temperature sensors. And so they know that, in fact, the multi-layer insulation has continued to degrade. So when we arrive, I expect it not to look a lot different than it did on STS-109, but I do expect that, for instance, the patches will be further degraded, and some of the multi-layer insulation, the silver Teflon on the outside of the telescope, will be peeled back a little bit more. The atmosphere or the environment where Hubble is pretty severe. The temperature extremes, atomic oxygen, the solar ultraviolet, all those nasty things in space are what are causing the telescope to degrade, and is somewhat expected. Hubble has been in space for 18 years. It's pretty remarkable that it's doing as well as it has. What I remember so vividly from the last missions is that once you open up the inside of the telescope, it looks absolutely brand new. And so we expect that to be the case as well. I don't know, Mass?
When we got it on 109 at the beginning of the flight, it had the old solar arrays on it, and they were kind of twisted and old, and we weren't sure if they were going to roll up. And then when we left it, we said goodbye to it at the end of the flight, it had these brand new solar arrays, which were smaller, rigid arrays, and it had a radiator hanging off the side of it, and a conduit going underneath it to hook up to the radiator. So it did have a different look from that. We changed the way the telescope looked after 109. Hopefully it'll look pretty much the same. I remember it looking nice and shiny when we worked on it. My first impression, wow, this is a lot shinier than when we're in the NBL. It looked really nice and pristine compared to what we have worked with on the ground. So I'm hoping it looks about the same.
Okay, with that, we will switch over to headquarters. We have some media there with questions.
Yes, this is Seth Borenstein at the Associated Press. For John Grunsfeld, since you have the longest and most diverse Hubble experience, can you tell us about the subtle intricacies of Hubble that few people know, and at the risk of anthropomorphizing it, does Hubble have a personality, and if so, I mean, how would you characterize it?
My team members have heard me say lots and lots of times various little bits and pieces about Hubble, and from a spacewalking perspective, it almost always comes down to don't break the Hubble. Hubble was not designed to be kicked or to be heavy-handed, and none of these folks are, but there are a lot of areas of Hubble that are more sensitive than others, and that's just part of our ensemble of tools that we keep in our brain as we go around Hubble is to be very careful with it. The scientific instruments themselves are pretty delicate. Various parts on the inside of the telescope, in particular MASS and Bueno will be working inside of the -V3 side of the telescope where the gyros are, and there's lots of obstacles in there that they have to maneuver around. It's something Steve Smith and I did on STS-103, and it was always kind of a scary place to be, and they're doing a great job in the pool and are going to do a great job in space, but there's kind of a rite of passage after you've done gyros, RSUs, of having been in that part of Hubble that's going to be kind of exciting for them. Especially Mike Good gets to be inserted upside down by Megan into really the middle of the telescope, almost as if you could look through and observe. It'll almost feel that way for Bueno, that he's going to be able to look through the telescope. Unfortunately, the aperture door is closed. That's the brakes. But it's almost impossible after you've been involved with all the people who are part of the Hubble family at the Goddard Space Flight Center, all the hundreds and hundreds of astronomers who use Hubble on a regular basis, the folks at Space Telescope Science Institute, and at all the NASA centers who have worked on Hubble. It's almost impossible not to start feeling like Hubble is a living being. It's just another satellite. But once you've worked on the program and are smitten with it, it is very easy to start adding personality to Hubble. And of course, calling it Hubble, after the great American astronomer, adds a little bit of fuel to that. I do feel like Hubble is kind of a friend, and that I'm going to visit an old friend that I haven't seen in a long time, that will be a little bit more weathered, will be a little bit older. The best part about it is that I know when we leave the Hubble at the end of this mission, STS-125, that it's going to be so much better than it's ever been before, and that we will have given it a much extended life, that I'm going to feel pretty good about that.
And just to follow up, in terms of the ACS repair, not only are you going to have to be doing it sort of around the corner, but some of the work will be sort of blind. Which is more difficult, doing it around the corner or not being able to see what you're doing?
Pretty much not being able to see what I'm doing makes me the most nervous. There's several screws where I'm having to do it by feel. I think the good news about doing the advanced camera for surveys, I'm hoping, is that when we're successful on EVA3, that once I come back inside, I'll be able to let MASS know how the screws felt, because I have 32 screws to remove. He's got a total of about 117, and so we'll be able to use the onboard knowledge to help each other out.
Okay, that was our last question from headquarters. We'll now switch to Goddard Space Flight Center for some more questions.
Hi, this is Alan Boyle with MSNBC. I wanted to ask Drew about this tool angle. It sounds as if you're almost like Mr. Fix-It. There was a reference to you working with your Comet and also coming up with the pick stick. Could you tell us a little bit more about that?
Well, let's see. The pick stick, it was actually, I want to talk about that specifically because that was something that I didn't do on my own. In fact, it was something that I thought of, I guess, on my own, but in talking to John about it shortly thereafter, I realized that he had been thinking the same thing on the last mission as well. And so we sort of collaborated on that, and the initial tool that I had in my mind was a toy that came out of one of my kids' toy boxes. That was the first thing that I envisioned using on Hubble. And then John had visited the local hardware store and came back with something, a tool very similar to the toy that I pulled out. And out of those two objects and our work together and working with Mike and Mike, we came up with this device that we're using to now, I guess, only install the rate sensing units. So, you know, a lot of that work, I spend a lot of time, as my wife and family can attest, in the garage, and you know, some of the other folks do as well. So, and it's not unique among the astronaut office to have that sort of experience. But I do spend a little bit of time tinkering in the garage, and you know, that's where I find my calm and peace. And I actually think about it as recurrency training to enable me to be able to contribute to the space program, and especially for EVA work like this. So I'm really happy that you know, that work I did as a kid and growing up in my early years has paid off and allowed me to contribute the way that I am now. And I think it's good for all of us. And I like bouncing those ideas off everybody and seeing how they fly. They don't all fly, but some of them will, I guess.
Okay, thanks. And I do have a follow-up, just to ask the standard question about things that you might be bringing up with you, mementos, anything that might be Hubble associated that you're bringing up this time.
We all get to carry a few special items of our own into the cabin that commemorate various things. And I did ask the University of Chicago, Hubble's alma mater, if they had some item that we could carry. On previous missions, we've carried some really unique things that are associated with Enwood Hubble. Last mission, we carried 2 small telescope eyepieces that he had used to observe, and I guess on the first servicing mission, they also carried an eyepiece, one from Yerkes Observatory and one from Mount Wilson Observatory. We also carried a small glass plate that had kind of a fuzzy object on it, which at the time it was not known that it was a galaxy, but and had an arrow pointing to something that said variable. And this was part of Hubble's great discovery, that there are external galaxies and that the universe is expanding. And those were very historic items. This time the University of Chicago topped themselves and came up with something that I think is even of more significance in Hubble's lifetime, which is a 1909 basketball. The University of Chicago, not necessarily now known as a sports powerhouse in the Midwest, but at the time had a very unique record. 1908, 1909, and 1909, 1910 were national champions in basketball, college basketball, and Hubble was a member of that team, and in fact was you know, one of their top players. And so he played with this basketball, and we've managed to flatten the basketball, and we'll be carrying that in orbit, just to kind of demonstrate that, you know, you really can be somebody who's very well-rounded and excellent in sports, but also somebody who did very, very well in physics and astronomy, and became perhaps the last century's most famous astronomer and one of the great American scientists. So we'll be carrying that aboard, and I imagine we'll have a little scrimmage on the middeck.
One other thing to mention is yesterday I was watching some of the other press conferences, and I heard one of NASA's chief scientists refer to Hubble as the most important scientific instrument ever since the development of Galileo's telescope. And as it turns out, we're flying something that gives honor to the heritage of Hubble. And Mike, you might mention what that is.
Yeah, we're going to be, it's the 400th anniversary of Galileo making his observations and publishing them with his telescope. And we're going to be taking a replica of that telescope, not the actual one, but one that was built in the same way that his was, from the same wood. They have the same lenses that he used, built at Murano Glass in Venice. And the Galileo's Museum in Florence has sent us this replica that they had built. It has the same leather outside casing that he used, and it's a pretty incredible object. So we're going to have this on board as well, kind of as a tribute to what Galileo did 400 years ago and what Hubble does for us now. So kind of start to finish in astronomy.
Okay, that was our last question from Goddard. We'll now switch to Kennedy Space Center.
Yes, this is Marcia Dunn of the Associated Press. A couple questions for Scott. Scott, as commander, how much more dangerous do you really see this mission of yours, given the increased orbital debris risk, no safe haven? no guarantee that an STS-400 could reach you. I'm just wondering how much more dangerous do you see all this put together, and how do you square that away personally for yourself?
Well, it does add up when you look at it. We are a little different. We don't have the station to go to, all the things you alluded to. But when I go back and I look at the shuttle itself, really we are flying a mission that in the big picture is very similar to all the other things that we do. And then I look back at the last mission I flew, and I think about how much more we know now about the environment and inspection capability and repair capability than what we had last time. And I do feel that we have improved, that we are doing better, that this is a mission that can and should be flown, and that we are handling the risk to the best of our ability with everything that we've learned over the past 4 to 5 years. And I'm honored to be a part of the team, and I think the rest of my crew feels the same way.
Thank you. And I'm wondering how much conferring or head-to-head time you've had with Dom Gorey. Have the two of you sat down very often to hash out the possibility of a STS-400, or how much you two personally have interacted?
Well, we spend a lot of time touching base with each other a couple of times a week, talking about the different things we've seen in simulations, how the rendezvous are going, what we think the flight would be like if we had to do that, and also kidding each other about things about, I don't want to hear anything about him not making it up in any of his sims. Keep coming no matter what. But it really is, he's a great guy, and I know that the whole program is set up to do whatever it takes to give us the best chance of coming home.
Okay, that was our last question from Kennedy Space Center. We'll return here to Johnson for questions. We'll start on this side. Mark?
Oh, it's Mark Carreau from Houston Chronicle again. And I guess this is sort of an outlook question. There's always a chance, I guess it's been characterized as first do no harm, and I kind of wonder how you implement that in your crew philosophy about the work you're going to do. When do you know that if you do something it could make it worse? How do you inform the people who are expecting you to do something and you have questions about it? How do you talk that out if you need to? Or do you think that's just probably not something that would come up? And I'm talking about the condition of the telescope.
That if we went out the door and we're looking at the telescope and we felt something that we'd planned to do was no longer a safe activity, how would we readjust that? One of the things I've been very happy to see in all our simulations is the rapport that we've developed with the flight director, Tony Sacacci, and the ability to communicate. In the past, on some missions, people have felt like, well, we need to sort of protect what we're trying to say and be gentle in our comments. And we've tried to demonstrate a brutal honesty as we work through the mission in being straight up with each other about what we see and what we feel. Some of the things I'm concerned about, is the crew in a good shape to go out the door? If somebody's too tired, we might have to wave something off. And there's so much invested, the pressure to perform, to get everything done, but I don't want that to blind us to the point where we miss the forest for the trees and put somebody into an unsafe situation by not stepping back and saying, you know what, even though we'd love to get everything done, we may not be able to because of where we are right now, what's happened with the telescope or changes like that. And I think the rapport is there with the ground and us both thinking along the same lines, that we would have support for those kind of decisions if we had to make them.
For as many of the first-time flyers who want to answer, I'm wondering what you think of the launch on need capability, whether you think it's so unlikely it doesn't really add to your comfort level about making the flight, or whether you do really regard it as a valuable safety net.
Let's see, I have some thoughts about it. First of all, from what I've tracked on Launch on Need, I think it's a very viable mission. So I think all the things that would have to occur, the rendezvous of two vehicles in space, connection, having got to go in the pool in the EMU suit and actually do the transfer and look around Hubble, I think it's very viable. It would be a bit of a nail biter on the ground, but I think in the air between Dom and Scooter and the rest of the crews, we would execute that in a very professional manner. I think there'd be a heck of a party on the other side, and I think it would be sad to let Atlantis go, but I feel very comfortable that we have a mitigation that we probably won't have to use, but I think it could easily be accomplished.
Just briefly, I'll just agree with what Scooter said earlier, that I'm very confident that the program, that NASA is an agency, and that the country will do everything they need to do to come up and rescue us if that situation came up. So I'm very confident in the mission, and that's really all.
I think my thoughts on the subject are that it is extremely unlikely that we would ever get in this scenario, and I think that we all sort of feel the same way. This is not something that we expect to ever have to do. That being said, knowing that the program has put the attention, the manpower, the folks that have been working on this have really taken it very seriously and have planned it as if the mission were to take place. And so I agree that if it did have to take place, we have a high probability of success.
Well, I guess I just want to emphasize that I really don't view this as any different than a space station mission leading up until now. I mean, all the missions up until now have had essentially launch on need capability. The difference between our mission and those missions is we have a shorter time period, and that's why they're on the pad waiting for us. But the whole scenario itself, in terms of rescue, someone coming to get you, that's the same as a space station mission has been up until this point post-Columbia. So, that should be stressed that this is not unique. What's unique is the time frame, the amount of time they have to come up, and for that reason, we have that vehicle sitting on the pad.
Thank you. Space.com.
Hi, Jeremy Hsu from Space.com and Space News. This is another question for the first-time flyers. I'm just curious if anyone has any particular moment they're looking forward to on the mission, whether it's something you've heard from the veterans about the approach to Hubble or just during the EVAs.
I had one thought. I've flown a lot of airplanes throughout the years, and some of them more higher performance than others, but sitting on 7.5 million pounds of thrust when you only weigh about 4.5 million pounds is going to be a highlight to me, to get those 3 engines going and then watch them go into space. So that, along with seeing Hubble for the first time, I think are the moments I'm going to enjoy the most.
I think for me as a spacewalker, I've stood in my driveway at home and looked up and watched Hubble go overhead. You can see it go across the night sky, much like you can watch the International Space Station. And so I think about actually being up there and going outside and spacewalking for the first time and going out to Hubble and grabbing onto it and imagining holding on and going along with Hubble across the night sky at 17,500 miles an hour. And then, crawling up a little bit more and opening the doors and actually crawling inside the telescope. So that's probably the moment I'm looking forward to the most.
I think I'm looking forward to the moment right after we get a good, solid grapple on the telescope. And then I'll be able to enjoy all the rest of the flight as well. I'm also really looking forward to having my classmates, Mike Good and Drew Feustel and I all started in the astronaut office at the same time. And watching them do their first space flight is going to be really cool. So I'm looking forward to hearing their first impressions when they come back inside.
I guess the moment that I'm looking forward to the most is that instant of coming out of the airlock and facing the Earth below, and just seeing that outer space and just having my visor between me and space and seeing the Earth there. That to me is going to be fascinating and amazing, and I have to remember to hold on at that point so I don't go anywhere. But I'm sure that's going to be what's going to leave the largest imprint on my brain, is just getting out into space for the first time.
Okay, Gina.
Gina Sinceri, ABC News for Scott. 2 things are happening this year that seemed highly unlikely at one point. You're going to repair Hubble, and the Cubs are in the playoffs. How can this year possibly get any better for you?
Well, I am still hoping that the Cubs don't fold like they seem to be headed in that direction. So there are some things that are just incredible, and the Cubs going to the World Series is one of them. But all of us going back to Hubble, that's another pretty dramatic achievement. So yeah, this could be an incredible year. I hope so.
Harwood again for Scott. You know, back before the first Hubble servicing mission, that flight had taken on such a thing for NASA, you know. I mean, people were saying, you know, if you can't do this, you can't build a station and blah, blah, blah. It really took on a light. This time around, you guys are launching in the heat of the presidential campaign. There is at least some uncertainty as to what's going to happen to manned spaceflight in this country, depending on who gets elected and what happens down the road. Not to say that you need any extra pressure for a flight like this, but how do you view it in that context, in your all's need, as you put it, not to do anything wrong to Mr. Hubble?
Well, you are right. I think back on that first servicing mission, NASA more or less bet the agency that they could pull this off and turn it from a black eye into what it's become, which is just an incredible highlight, demonstrated human spaceflight achievement with man and machine meshed together to make some incredible discoveries. I think it really is the first step in exploration beyond our home planet, laying the groundwork for constellation in the future. Our mission, I think, has a lot of those things brought to mind. As we stand on the edge of a new exploration effort, can we demonstrate that we can make Hubble better than it's ever been before? Can we pull this off? As we also stand at a change in administrations, can we demonstrate that human spaceflight still has relevance, still can achieve things? Hubble means so much to folks around the world that we've seen as we've gone different places and talked to people, how many people bond with the telescope. It does cutting-edge science while at the same time connecting with the average person in the street. And there are very, very few scientific achievements that have that level of involvement. And it's incredible when you think about it. And I hope that we as a group, we as NASA, take advantage of that achievement and use this opportunity to highlight what we can do as we lay the groundwork to look forward to the future and exploration further out and going beyond.
Jack Renault from CBS. Beyond Megan's successful grapple, does early EVA task success, does it build momentum? Do you get your rhythm? Is it important to further success, or is each task its own animal? And
well, we do have different mission objectives, things that are more important than other, a priority list, but the way the mission is choreographed, there's only so much time, and if you have a problem at one place, it's going to ripple down and something will have to fall off the bottom. So early task success is imperative to getting the mission off, but middle task success and late task success is just as important, because everything we're doing, I think, is really important to the long-term duration of Hubble as a scientific instrument.
Todd Halverson of Florida Today for John Grunsfeld. John, I was just wondering, as an astronomer, what it is you think about Hubble that makes it really touch people around the world. What is it that makes it the people's telescope?
I think there's a story to Hubble that has been unfolding over the last 20-plus years that is very much like a great novel. It has a good plot line. As we read along in the book, there's surprises, and we don't know how it's going to end until eventually it does end. And with this mission in particular, we're adding 5 or 10 years to the story. The story has lots of twists and turns. It has politics. It's a great novel. But in its basis, Hubble is trying to answer fundamental human questions. It's not an arcane, scientific discipline that has to do with something that only a handful of people in the world understand. It's Hubble's observations and the science behind it is trying to answer very fundamental questions. What is the origin of the universe? Where do we come from, in essence, the origin of the chemical elements? What's the history of the universe? Where are we going? Where have we come from? Where we're going? How are planets formed? How are stars and planets formed? How did the galaxies form? More recently, which is getting a little bit more technical, but we've started to learn more about what's inside of the universe. What's the universe made out of? Also, these are questions that humans have probably been asking forever, but once we had written language and we started having Babylonians and Greeks and people who would document these questions, we find that these are ancient questions. And we live in a remarkable time where we have a telescope, the Hubble Space Telescope, and the other scientific instruments that NASA has built and flown that are starting to answer those very big fundamental questions. So I think inquiring minds want to know these answers to these questions, and Hubble is helping to provide those answers. So it's something that, from a curiosity point of view, helps people, understand their place in the universe. From another point of view, though, Hubble has eyes much like ours. It is an ultraviolet visible telescope with infrared capability, and it's that visible range that's the same as our eyeballs that allows us to see parts of the universe and how beautiful the universe is. It's better than the best artwork with the same kind of eyes that we have. And I think it's bringing that beauty of the universe to planet Earth that is also some of its appeal.
All right, thank you, John, and the entire group. That's our last question, so that will conclude today's briefing. For media that are here present at Johnson Space Center, we'll have a photo opportunity following in the Teague lobby. Otherwise, we'll return to NASA television. Thank you.
Good morning, everybody, and welcome to NASA's Johnson Space Center here in Houston. Well, yesterday you heard all about the telescope and the why we're going to repair that on this mission of Atlantis. Today you're going to hear all about the teams that are going to go and execute that mission, including the crew later this afternoon. But starting off, kicking off today's set of briefings is Tony Sacacci. He is the lead flight director for the STS-125 mission. He's going to give you a complete overview of the mission, and then we'll take questions from here and other NASA centers that are online with us this morning. So with that, I will turn it over to Tony and let him go.
Well, thanks, Kyle, and good morning to everyone. Before I get started, I wanted to thank the PAO team that helped me put this presentation together. They put a lot of long hours in, and hopefully you enjoy what we put together. Let's see, the flight, well, it's been a long time coming. Many days of uncertainty with the hurricanes and payload processing, and even if we were going to have a Hubble flight. But it's finally here, and we're all very excited to be part of that. Myself, of course, very excited to be part of Servicing Mission 4. And just so we don't get confused, it is the 5th servicing mission to the HST. I had no control of that. But I'm happy to be able to be a chapter in the HST history book and part of that, and the entire team that put this all together. I had a great time preparing for the mission, and a great opportunity and privilege to work with all these different folks across all the centers, of course here at JSC and Goddard and at KSC as we put the whole flight together. Everyone on the team is highly motivated, and which to me is going to make this mission a success, and I have very high confidence when we launch on October 10th that we're going to be ready and, as best as we can be to support execution of the mission. Friday, I don't know if you guys probably saw pictures or not, but I attended the the last crew hardware review at KSC. Everything looked really great. They had all the carriers out, all the tools in place, and you could really feel the excitement just brewing, knowing that we were getting closer and closer to actually getting this mission off. As a side note, before I get started here, this flight in itself is extra special to me because STS-109, the last Hubble servicing mission, was my first as a shuttle flight director. So, what, 6+ years ago. And it was a great way to start my career as a flight director. You know, I was the Orbit 2 flight director, and I got to basically clean up after the EVAs after Brian Austin got completed, but I got bit by the HST bug, and immediately after the flight, I went to my management and told them that, hey, I wanted to be lead on the next HST mission. Well, needless to say, it's worked out pretty well. So enough about me. Let's go ahead and get to the good stuff. Mission objectives. You guys have probably heard this from John and from the HST folks, but I wanted to reiterate what we're going to do here for Servicing Mission 4. We're going to leave the telescope in the best condition ever, and I'm sure you heard Dave LeCrone talk about the apex of its capability. Lifetime at a minimum out to 2013, and depending on what scientific instrument you take a look at, the increased capability 10 to 70% more than where we're at today. So we're all really excited about getting that completed for the HST team and carrying on with the scientific and the great things that the Hubble does for us. Sorry about that. All right, well, let's see. As tradition goes, we're going to go ahead and do a quick introduction of the crew. You guys will be able to talk to them this afternoon, but let me just go through there. If I can have still one, please. All right, let's see. We have a great mix of HST veterans and first-time space flyers as part of the 125 team. I've had a great opportunity to know all of them very well. You know, the mission about 2 years ago is when they actually put the mission on the books, and I had the opportunity actually to do a couple leadership classes with them and such, and know them very, very well. Have high confidence that they're going to be able to successfully carry out the challenge we have before them. See, and starting from the left, I want to make sure I get that right, we have Mike Massimino. This is Mike's second space flight, and coincidentally his second space flight to the Hubble. STS-9 was his last mission, and he'll be EV3 for the mission. Next to him is his spacewalking partner, Mike Good. This is Mike's first flight, and he'll be EVA4. Next to Mike is Greg, and Ray J, you'll hear him be called Johnson. This will be his first flight. Of course, in the middle there you have Scott Altman, or Scooter. This is his fourth flight, and again his second flight to the HST. He was the 109 commander. Next to Scooter is Megan MacArthur. This will be her first flight, and Megan is going to be the robotic heavy. She'll be doing most of the robotics work on the mission. Next to Megan is John Grunsfeld. This is John's fifth space flight, and he's been one of the lucky ones. This is his third to the HST, of course, with 109 being his last one, and he'll be EV1. And last but not least, my buddy Drew Feustel. This will be his first flight, and he'll be EV2 paired with John. Let's see, okay. So we can go ahead and get still number 2, please. You guys have seen this before, and I'm going to have to apologize. I'm going to read the description of the patch. I just don't have it memorized, so bear with me here. The overall structure of the patch is a composition of the universe, shown in blue and filled with planets, stars, and galaxies. The black background is indicative of the mysteries of the dark energy and dark matter, and the red border of the patch represents the red-shifted glow of the early universe and the limit of Hubble's view into the cosmos. Soaring by the telescope is a space shuttle, which initially deployed Hubble and has enabled astronauts to continually upgrade the telescope, significantly contributing to the expansion of human knowledge. So that's what happens when you read stuff, you mess up. But, all right. Next part of I want to talk about was the other flight directors that will be supporting me on this mission. Of course, myself, I'll be working Orbit 1 and working through all the EVAs and such. If I can get still number 3. Norm Knight, Norm will be the Ascent Entry Shuttle Flight Director. If I can get still 4. Rick LeBrode will be the Orbit 2 Flight Director. And if I can get still 5, please. And Paul Dye will be the Orbit 3 Shuttle Flight Director. Also, Paul is the lead flight director for STS-400, so he's been working both of these missions. I had to focus enough on the Hubble mission, I had to go ahead and give that excitement to him. See, we're going to start here with overview of the orbiter payload bay complements. We can go ahead and roll video 1, please. Of course, the standard payload overview. We'll have the TSA, the tool storage assemblies, where all the contingency towel repair and any other contingency EVA tools are stowed. External airlock. The crew's really happy about that because the last flight on 109 we had an internal one and didn't have a lot of space to move. A robotic arm, our standard manifest. Orbiter boom sensors system, which we'll be using for all our TPS inspections. So we'll talk about the super lightweight interchangeable carrier, the SLIC, and I'm going to go through each one of these carriers later on. So this is a quick overview. The orbital replacement unit carrier, of course, the flight support system, which will hold the Hubble during the servicing mission, and the multi-use lightweight equipment carrier. Oh, I'm sorry. Manipulator foot restraint. That's what we'll be using at the end of the arm to do all the EVAs off of. Let's see, what I want to do, like I said, is just give you a quick summary detail of the various carriers that we'll be using. This afternoon, Tomas Gonzalez will be giving you guys a detailed assessment of all the EVAs, and he'll be pointing out all the different carriers also. But I wanted to give you a quick overview of where we're at today. So if we can go ahead and run video 2, please. This is the super lightweight interchangeable carrier, and I think I'm just going to call them by the acronym since I already told you guys about it. WSIPE is where the wide field camera 3 is going to be launched in, and we'll bring the old one back. And also on the SLIC, we have the battery modules. Here you see them without the MLI on them. That'll be which will be changing out on EVAs 1 and 2. See if I can go ahead and get video 3 running, please. Here we have, of course, the ORUC, the Orbital Replacement Unit carrier. I wanted to point out some of the enclosures on it. Here's the small ORU protective enclosure, and I'm going to go ahead and skip the ORU protective enclosure for the remainder since hopefully I sample. But basically, this, you can see this has the RSU, STS, and ACS hardware that we'll be using. Here's the LOPE. It has all the ACS hardware that we're using for that task. Multiple carriers have multiple stuff, so the crew will have to go to each one of these enclosures to pick it up. Right here is the FGS Scientific Instrument Protective Enclosure. Of course, that'll have the FDS-2 that we'll be replacing. Next is the Wide Field Planetary Camera handhold. That's what we'll be using to install the new Wide Field Camera 3. The FGS handhold, the Fight Guidance Sensor handhold, we're going to go ahead and use that to remove Wide Field Planetary Camera 2 and also remove the old FGS from the telescope. This is just a forward fixture where all those are attached to. The aft fixture here, that's what we'll be temporarily stowing all the instruments as we go through the various EVAs. And again, Tomas will give you more detail on what that looks like. The auxiliary transport module 2, again, you can see this one includes all the STS hardware that we'll be using for the EVA. The NOPE, the new ORU protective enclosure, again, you can see that this has all the ACS hardware that we'll be using for the EVA. Again, multiple carriers that they have to go to. The axial scientific protective enclosure, that'll have the COS that we'll be installing, and the CoStar will go in there for return. The fastener capture plate, as you guys know, and again, Tomas will be talking about this, but we have about 117 different fasteners we have to remove from the STS, and that'll help us do it. And of course, last but not least, the IMAX camera that we have on the ORUC. Okay, let's go ahead and roll video 4, please. This is the flight support structure that we talked about. That'll house the HST during the servicing mission. Below we have the berthing and positioning system support, which is the BAP support. And that provides stability on the FSS pivot. So, let's see, we got a portable foot restraint. That's not planned to be used. That's just contingency for this flight, but I thought I'd pick it out because somebody would ask a question about it. Downlock mechanism, basically that's configured for ascent loads, and what we do as part of the SSS prep is go ahead and retract that. Pivoter mechanism, of course, to pivot the rotator, or pivot the, can't even lose it, rotator mechanism to go ahead and rotate the FSS. Main umbilical, this will be connecting to the HST, and that'll be providing the orbiter power to the telescope. And the berthing latches, of course, that'll what will be holding down the HST during the EVA activities. Soft capture mechanism, I'm sure you guys talked about. This has a lids interface on it. Basically, we'll be installing it in the rationale is it might be one of these days that we'll have a deorbit module or something that we can go ahead and rendezvous with it and do a controlled deorbit with the HST, which basically is out in the 2020 time frame. And this is in the stowed configuration. And as part of the FSS prep, we go ahead and pivot the FSS up to 90 degrees. And we showed in here during EVA1, they'll be installing the BAPS post. All right, let's go ahead and roll video 5, please. This will be the multi-use logistics equipment carrier, the Mule. First thing we have here is Mule integrated Noble carrier, the Mink, and of course that houses Nobles 5, 7, and 8. As part of the Noble task, we'll have wire cutters we'll need to cut off MLI, and then a roller tool that we'll need to put the radiators on, and again, Tomas will talk more about that. We have a relative navigation sensor kit that we have up here. You see the cameras, we have GPS antennas, and of course the electronics to run all that. And basically we're just trying to get, it's a DTO, just trying to get some data that we possibly use for some automated rendezvous capability. The COPE, the contingency protective enclosure, hopefully we never have to go in here, but you can see that it has spare items for RSU, STS, and the RSU electronics control unit. Low gain antenna protective cover, basically we'll be installing that on the HST to protect kick loads on the antenna cover. And the locks, the latch over center kits, we'll be installing them on the minus V2 door on EVA1 to get ahead to help us do the ACS task on EVA3. Well, next I'm going to be providing you an overview of the mission timeline activities. See, why don't we go ahead and play video 6. Day starts out like any other mission with the launch, and you can see here is the STS-125 launch. And I don't know about you guys, but I always am awed and amazed when I see this and just the power generated and the beauty of it. I can watch Ascents every day. Again, this was a early morning launch, if I remember correctly, and of course we'll be launching 11:30 Central, so it'll be a nighttime launch. You can see the crew, the STS-125 crew here doing their post-insertion training. Of course, you'll see as soon as they hit MECO here, they'll be hitting the ground running. You can see Drew and Mass and John in the mid-deck. They'll be going up, and John's hurry up and taking off his helmet and such. You'll see John be climbing up the ladder here with the video camera, try to get some ET photography. Unfortunately for the October 10th launch, it's going to be dark, so we won't really get any of that. See him running up here. Okay. Well, as we know, on flight day 1, the rocket is converted into orbiting spacecraft, and the crew has multiple activities that they have to do. Of course, as we showed in the post-insertion, they'll be taking off their ACEs, removing seats, a whole bunch of systems reconfigurations they'll need to do, the laptops and photo TV setups, and of course powering up the HST space support equipment. We also have the standard umbilical well downlinks that we'll get. And then also, we talked about no ET video capability, being in the dark. This flight will be the first flight that we have high-def TV on the shuttle. So our plan is on flight day 1, we were going to do the ET video that the crew would take, but since it's in the dark, we're going to plan on doing some crew choice video if they have any, just to test out the HD TV capability. And I know the PAGO guys are going to like that. So you guys know, without the space station, we've lost the RPM photo shoot capability. And what we developed for this flight was 2, I'll call them substitute surveys that we'll be doing to basically get the same pictures that we would on the RPM. Let's go ahead and roll video number 7. Flight day 1, we'll be doing a upper crew end effector survey. And basically the same resolution and such that we would get with RPM photos. That takes about 50 minutes to get done, and we'll have to do that in the daylight. See, of course, for the crew, that'll complete a very busy flight day 1. What we plan on doing as part of the overnight config is we'll be setting the arm up in a position where we'll be doing a payload base survey, looking at all the various carriers and such to make sure no damage occurred during ascent. Flight day 2, of course, you know, we say this for every mission that, you know, the crew, like I said, from MECO till basically the day, or their off-duty day, they're going from day to night, and And let's see, Flight Day 2 is not any different. It's a very busy day preparing for rendezvous in the EVAs. Of course, we'll be doing the EMU checkout of all 4 suits, the flight support structure prep. We talked about it earlier in that photos, but we'll be doing the down lock, retract, and then the pivoting it up to 9 degrees. We'll do a rendezvous tool checkout, and of course, and also, I'm sorry, we do a depress to 10.2 psi, and going down to 10.2 psi reduces the pre-breathe requirement. So once we get it, we can minimize the requirements for pre-breathe. And of course, let's not forget our Flight Day 2 TPS inspection surveys. You guys have seen the standard ones where we do all the RCC and wing leading edge and nose cap. Well, again, like I said, we added belly tile surveys for this flight. In the belly tile surveys, we'll use the intensified television camera, the black and white, to provide imagery, and the way we have it set up, it'll provide the same resolution detection capabilities as the RPM photos with the digital cameras. So if we can go ahead and run video 8, please. First of all, you'll see here we're doing the OBSS ungrapple. OBSS unburst, sorry. Ungrapple would be bad. And then we'll be pivoting the table up to 90 degrees. We do the unberth, and we do this just to deconflict the TV. Of course, here's something you guys are familiar with, the wing leading edge inspections. And this, we sped it up a couple times. We'll be sitting here for the exploration. Here's the new surveys that we included. This is the starboard belly survey. And this is, of course, sped up 2 times, or 3 times, actually. Basically, we use the camera, the ITVC camera, to view the belly. And that was the starboard side. That takes about 30 minutes to get done. Then we go ahead, finish up the starboard wing leading edge. Standard again. One of the things I wanted to talk about, usually for a station flight, it's about 6.5 hours, all the activities that are required to do TPS inspections. For the Hubble flight, it's going to be 9 hours, just because we had to add the 2 hours and 10 minutes to do the belly tile survey. So basically, we'll be once we start this, we'll be going from end to end without any stop. Usually on an ISS flight, they have a meal in between to break it up. But for this, it's end to end, so make sure we get it completed before the day, and then get it set up for our last rendezvous burn. We just did the nose cap survey. Now we're starting the port wing leading edge survey. Breakout point where we do the port belly survey. And there's a couple pause points that we put in, or actually one pause point we put in that we're actually taking imagery of the ET doors just to make sure that we don't see the stripes and can verify that they're closed. You can see this is going to, and this in itself is going to take 110 minutes to complete on the port side. Again, come back into the port wing leading edge survey. Finish that up. See, in addition to this, we'll be doing the standard OMS pod surveys with the digital cameras. You can see we're getting back here. We're going to go ahead and get we're going, then right after that, we'll go ahead and go into OBSS berth. See, again, another very busy day, action-packed, 16 hours. See if we can, Flight Day 3, well, this is the day that everyone's been waiting for to get Hubble grappled and put in the payload bay on the FSS. Again, the day consists of rendezvous, grapple and berth, and then, of course, the EVA-1 prep activities. We can go ahead and roll video 9, please. Here's an animation of the rendezvous. This is an R-bar approach we'll be doing to the telescope, coming from the bottom. That's going to be a neat sight to see. Here we have the STS-125 crew working over in a simulator for the rendezvous and grapple. You can see the graphics on that. I just remember the first sim we did when we did a rendezvous, even though it was SMS graphics, everyone was basically awed when they saw the HST because, you know, we're all used to seeing the station coming in our view, but when we saw that, we were amazed. Again, this is some 109 footage of actual rendezvous and grapple. Still pretty amazing and awe-inspiring there. This is the end effector view. You can see the white area there is a wide field planetary camera 2, which we'll be changing out, and over there to the middle was a battery bay 3, which we'll be going into to change that battery out. Here's the end effector grappling. Slow process, but well worth it. Here we are with 109 with the telescope captured and getting ready to berth it. Just a quick animation of the actual berthing activities. This takes about an hour or so to get this completed. Of course, my team will be on. Won't leave until we get actually berthed. I want to make sure we go from beginning to end. Nothing against the other guys. But. Next, we'll be doing a RMS end effector survey. Basically, just see what kind of condition, again, the telescope is since we've seen it last 6.5 years ago. Again, I'm sure the Hubble guys will be excited to see all this. And what we have here is Ray J will be taking digital photos also out of the back window after the RMS survey is complete. What we have here is a solar array slew to 0 degrees. Basically, that's just getting it prepped and ready for the next day's EVA. You guys probably all know this, but we're in the minus V3 forward position in when we get it berthed. Again, just after the solar array slew to 0, the crew will go through, finish up the EVA-1 tool prep, and then do EVA-1 review. We'll get them to bed early and get ready for what we came up here to do. See, of course, the next 5 days, we have 5 back-to-back EVAs. And again, what I planned on doing, and basically you'll see that we'll be doing the same process over and over for the 5 days, different EVA activities, of course. I'm going to, again, just provide a quick overview of what we'll be doing, and then later on this morning, Tomas will be giving you it more in detail. If I can have still number 6 first. Of course, here's spacewalkers John and Drew. They'll be doing EVA number 1. If I can go ahead and get video 10, please. Just wanted to include some footage of, here's John on 109, getting prepped and ready for his first EVA. I'm sure he'll be just as happy for this flight. If I can go ahead and get still 7, please. Like we talked about, minus V3, part of the telescope, and you can see the location of the wide field camera, same view that we showed on the end effector, and where Bay 3 is there over on the right. That's where the EVA activities will be occurring that day. We do initial setup when we get out the doors that we have to go ahead and put the MFR, the foot restraint, install it into the end effector. So that's going to be our work platform. So that's about an hour in the beginning of the EVA. Then, like we talked about, the crew will install the BAPS post. And once we get to that is when we get to the real EVA activity. So if I can have still number 7, please. Yes, I'm sorry. Still number 8. I'm going to check these out. Okay, basically I just wanted to show a picture of the wide field camera 3. You see it's about the size of a baby Grand in relationship with a person there. Pretty big thing, mass handling. If we can go ahead and get video 11, please. You can see here's a STS-61 video of Jeff Hoffman installing and removing it here, the wide field camera from STS-61, just showing you the mass handling problems. You can see how big this thing is. And then we'll be showing you the installation here shortly, putting it back in. But you can see slow movements. We're not in any rush. We're going to take our time. We have this all timed line now to get done in 6.5 hours, and we have high confidence that we're going to get it all completed. Here, of course, is the install of the wide field camera. As far as next activity after we get the wide field camera complete is Bay 3 battery R&R. We've been in the Bay 3s before installing VIX voltage improvement kits, but with the batteries, their lifetime, you know, they've exceeded their lifetime so far, but to get it the additional 5 years, they wanted to, the HST program wants to, of course, go ahead and install a new battery. So if we can get still 9, please. Basically, like I showed you, this is the work site for the Bay 3 battery. We'll have Drew on the end of the arm doing the actual removal and installation of the battery. And then we'll have the choreography where John will be down on the slick removing the other battery. But again, Tomas will, it's hard for me not to talk a little bit of detail, but Tomas will get more detail for you. So if we can go ahead and go to still 10, please, real quick. Just to show you the size of the battery. You can see all the different batteries, 3 different modules, 3 different battery systems. And you can see the something new with these batteries. We have isolator switches. You can see those in the middle. With the batteries we have today, we don't have isolator switches, so it just makes the EVA that much more safer. Okay. In addition, what we'll finish up, EVA 1 is we'll install the soft capture mechanism, basically about a 10 minutes task where we'll just use a PGT to drive a bolt, so to speak, and it's a, and I shouldn't, Tomas will tell you more about it, but it's a pretty simple task if everything works right. And then the locks, like I said, the lock over center kits, basically we install these on the -V2 door and release the bathtub bolts that are on there now, so when we go to do the ACS task, it's a lot easier to get the doors open, and it gets us within the 6.5-hour bingo that we've been planning and training to. Of course, you know, while John and Drew are having fun, the other crew are busy doing things. They're just not sitting there watching. Scooter is going to be backing up robotic arm activities, and of course, he as a CDR, he'll be making sure everybody's doing the right thing and just keeping the big picture view. Ray J will be doing all the photo TV activities, and Mike and Mike, the other EVA team, will be sharing IV activities for different tasks. And Megan is the prime ARMIS operator, like I talked about previously. After the EVA is complete, the crew will go through the post-EVA activities and tool preps, and then do EVA 2 crew procedures review. Flight day 5, EVA number 2. What our plan is, if focus inspection is necessary, our plan is to, if we have to do it, it'll be on flight day 5, and we'll do it in parallel with the EVA prep activities. That way it won't impact EVA start. Of course, there's a finite time where it won't. It's about an hour and a half of actual focus inspection tasks that won't impact the start of the EVA day. Anything greater than that, we'll just have to take a look at where we're at when we get the EVA started, and we'll see what kind of tasks we can complete that day. Let's see if I can get still number 11, please. Second group of spacewalkers is Mike Good and Mike Massimino. You'll hear Bueno and Mass a lot because that's what they go by. Let's see if I can get video 12, please. This is Mass getting ready for his first EVA on STS-125. You can see he's a little excited here. And Rick over there giving a pat on the head, making sure he does good. See, we're back on work site, the -V3, and if I can get still 12, please. And our activities that day will be the RSU changeouts, all 3 of them, and then we'll be going over to Bay 2 to do the battery R&R. Let's go ahead, still 13, a little bit more detailed. This is from the NBL, if I remember correctly, showing you where all the fixed head star trackers are in the actual RSUs. And then in our order that we're going to remove them, again, stealing Tomas's thunder, but it's 3, 2, and 1, if I remember correctly. Let's go ahead and get still 14. This is basically an RSU, probably about 15 and 6 inches thick. They'll be carrying on. We'll get, like I talked about, they'll be getting out of the one of the enclosures and carrying them over. And see, let's go ahead and get video 13, please. This is actual 103 footage of Steve Smith here getting into the aft shroud to do the RSU changeout, and John's over there free floating. There's John, or actually there's John. He's on the PFR inside the aft shroud door. Let's go ahead and do still 15, please. This is just a quick picture of the Bay 2 battery, which we'll be replacing. Okay, again, the other crew does have other activities. Same thing as I talked about the previous one. Scooter will be backing up the RMS, overall view of what's going on, RAJ, photo TV. And this time John and Drew will be sharing the IV activities. And of course Megan will be the prime RMS operator again. Again, second day, same story, EVA, post-EVA activities, and then getting set up for the next day's EVA number 3. Flight day 6, John and Drew get to go out again. And before we get the EVA started, we have to rotate the telescope from the -V3 to the -V2 position. So if we can go ahead and get video 14, please. Actually, it takes about 8 to 12 minutes to do that. I can't remember specifically, but we just wanted to show you what we'll be doing to get it set up. Scooter will be doing that before the crew goes out the door. We'll be doing today's activities is the CoStar, or I should say the COS, replacing that, the CoStar replacing that with the COS, and then the ACS Part 1. If we can get still 16 real quick. You can see here animated footage of this. You can see the COS is over there on the left side of -V2, and the ACS is there on the right side. And you can notice here, well, that as far as the ACS, where John will be doing most of his work is in the upper right corner of the ACS, where he has, limited reach and limited visibility. It's going to be a challenging task, but like I said, we've been running this in the NBL. The crew's been doing really great, and we have high confidence we can get this repair completed, and I'll talk a little bit more about that. If we can go ahead and get still 17. This is actually the COS. Just kind of show you it's a big refrigerator size instrument. If I can go ahead and get video 15, please. This is video of STS-61 where this is Kathy Thornton and Tom Akers. Kathy's on the arm here. They're removing the HSP, which is the high-speed photometer, that big old refrigerator-looking thing, and then they're going to go ahead and replace that with the CoStar. When the CoStar was originally put in there to help with all the imagery problems that they were having. Here they are putting the CoStar in. Again, slow and deliberate, making sure we get it all lined up and put in. So if we can get still 18 real quick, we'll talk about the ACS again. You guys have saw the still again over on the left side. But basically, and you've heard this before, the ACS task is not your standard EVA task. Usually when an instrument fails, they replace the entire instrument. Well, we didn't have that option for this flight. So this is a EVA first, where we're going to go through and remove and replace individual power supply cards. And like I talked about again with this ACS task, you have limited reach and capability. You can see here the CEBs on the right picture. John will be working on the one to the left, was basically the top one, where there's again, we'll have to remove a grid on that, and then the fastener capture plates and such. But Tomas will talk in more detail about that. But again, like I said, these guys have been working in the NBL and practicing this, and we have very high confidence that we're going to go ahead and get this completed. One of the, I should say, challenges of this, of course, like I talked about, we have a grid cover, and we have 36 non-captive fasteners that we have to remove. Let's see one, and of course, we have a fastener capture plate that'll catch all those, and again, Tomas will talk about it. One we'll be doing, there's power supply cards that we'll be removing, and then we install 2 of them for part 1. Then we'll be installing a temporary cover to work on it, to complete the work on EVA 5. And one of the things, so you're not surprised, that if things are going well on EVA 3 day, we already have a plan with the crew that we may stay out an extra hour to go ahead and get the part 2 of the task completed. By doing that, we save about 1.5 hours of overhead time that we would need on EVA 5. So we would extend the EVA out to 7.5 hours, and then, of course, reduce EVA 5 down to around 5.5 hours. So we think it's a good trade-off. Again, we don't have additional overhead tasks that we have to complete. Let's go to still 19 real quick. Just showing you real quick this electronics box that we'll be replacing. You can see all the similar cards to that, but basically we're removing all the 4 cards that are in the ACS, the electronics box now, and replacing it with this entire structure. And again, Tomas will talk more about that later on this morning. See, let's go to video 16. We'll be having them go ahead and rotate back from the minus V2 to the minus V3. Basically, we just do that to get the satellite in a good config, thermally wise, and also in a good config if we had to do an overnight rapid deploy. We could accomplish that. Again, the other crew will be doing their standard activity, same thing as I mentioned before, so I won't go through that again. Flight Day 7 activities, EVA number 4, it'll be Mike and Mike again. Let's go ahead and get video 17. To get prepped up for that, we have to do another rotate from the minus V3 to the plus V2. And today's activities will consist of STS repair and installation of Noble 8. If I get still 20, please. Basically, the work sites what we'll be at. You see the STS pointing there, and Noble 8's over there to the side. For the STS repair, we're going to, again, first of its kind, where, again, if an instrument fails, we usually replace that, but we're actually replacing one of the low voltage power supply cards, low voltage power supply card 2. Basically, same complexity as we said, the ACS task. You have a better reach and better visibility, but for this one, of course, you have 117 fasteners that you have to remove, and they have a new mini tool, I can't even think about it. Standard drill kind of mini power tool that they'll use to remove all this versus the PGT. And you wanted to use a low torque, smaller tool so you wouldn't strip any of the fastener heads. And it's been working out very well in the training. The crew actually has a trainer in their office that they practice every day to go through and removing all this stuff. And again, we have high confidence that we'll get that completed. See, let's go to still 21. Got ahead of myself there. Basically, the STS there, and what we'll be removing is the, you can see the highlighted kind of yellow cover. That's one we'll be removing. We'll have to remove the handle there. There's a cover clamp that we have to remove, but I'm getting into Tomas's expertise, so I'll let him explain all that to you. If we can get still 22, please. Here's a Noble Bay 8 that we'll be replacing. There's temporary fixes on this. They put, I think I remember on STS-82 it was. They went through and they put we carry up extra MLI just in case we have some MLI damage. They basically put some MLI on there and then actually put wiring across to keep it stable. I talked about previously we'll need the wire ties to remove the wiring, and then we'll remove all MLI, put that in the trash bag, and then install the Noble 8 on that. And Tomas will give you more details on, there's a radiator on it, helps out cooling that much more than it is today. See, again, for this flight, Scooter gets to actually work prime on the robotic arm while still maintaining his overall view. I guess that was something they gave him just to make sure he would stay on the flight. Ray J, again, will be in charge of the photos, and John and Drew will be sharing the IV activities, and Megan will be backing up Scooter on the RMS. One of the things I failed to mention is that, during the EVAs, we have to make sure we go to sun protect attitudes so we don't get sun directly in the aft shroud doors or any of the various instruments. So you'll see during the flight that the crew will be every hour or so they'll be typing in future maneuvers to maneuver the orbiter to make sure we stay in the correct attitude. So they'll also be busy doing that. Let's see, did I already get this one? Okay. And again, so we have to go ahead and rotate the HST. Let's go ahead and get video 18, please. Basically, what we're doing here is rotating from the plus V2 to the plus V3. And different than we were before, we were at the minus V3 the previous days. Plus V3 gives us the same support for backway deploy, of course, and also to make sure the telescope stays within its thermal limits overnight. But basically, that sets us up for the next day's EVAs. Flight Day 8, EVA number 5, the last of the 5. Again, this one, John and Drew will be doing the EVA again. This will be their third. And if we can get still 23, please. This is the work sites for the Fine Guided Sensor 2 and also Bay 5 Noble that we'll be replacing. If we can get still number 24, please. Again, here's a fine guidance sensor. Kind of looks pretty similar to the wide field camera. They basically are, of course, different capabilities. Again, baby grand size, slow and deliberate, putting it in, and high confidence all this task will be completed. After we get the ACS installed, we'll be doing the Noble 5 install. And the crew will be having the same activities. This time Scooter gets to go back to be the backup RMS operator, and the rest of the folks, our AJ, Photo TV, and this time Mike and Mike, of course, get to do IVA activities, and Megan gets back to being the prime RMS operator. After this EVA is complete, the standard post-EVA activities, and we'll be doing preps, EVA preps for a rapid response EVA on Flight Day 9. We'll talk about that a little bit, but basically, you know, our mission duration's 11 plus 2, and we have all those different programmatic requirements that we have to do. We didn't have the luxury on this flight to wait to have an unscheduled EVA or an extra day, like a 12 plus 2 day mission or anything like that. So to protect any deployed day contingencies where we can't get the telescope deployed, we'll be doing the EVA prep on the morning of Flight Day 10 in parallel with HST deploy activities, and we'll just be at the ready in case as we go through the milestones if we need an EVA. So if we can go ahead and get video 19, please. After we get complete with the EVAs, of course, we want to get back to standard deploy activities. You can see here we go to the -V2 position to deploy the low gain antenna masts. Then we'll go ahead and slew to 0 degrees, get our final battery charges in, get the antennas, high gain antennas in the right position, and that's a good config to go ahead and do the reboost that we have planned in the timeline, but we still need to determine how much we're going to do based on our propellant margins. All right, let's see. Flight Day 9, deploy day for the refurbished and repaired telescope. Let's go ahead and get video 20, please, and I'll talk through that. Of course, first thing we need to do that day is grapple the telescope, unberth it, and there's different milestones we go through that we determine if we need an EVA or not. You see here this unique position. This is for the RNS. The RNS folks asked us if they can go into a specific position where they can get some data on the telescope just to calibrate their instruments and such. So we went ahead and did that, and you can see we're getting into the deploy position. Second from last but not least is making sure the aperture door opens. Once that's complete, all we're waiting for is the ungrapple with the RMS. There's a series of SEP burn, SEP 1 and SEP 2 to make sure we have good relative motion with the HST. You'll see here we have some 109 footage of the deploy. It looks pretty neat. And after we get done with the deploy activities, we'll go ahead and do the FSS stowage. And basically that's just pivoting down to 43.8 because we leave the BAPS post on just to provide additional stability for entry. Of course, after all that, exciting activities are complete. We will do the standard late inspection of the wing leading edges and the nose cap. Get that all complete prior to sleep that day. Flight Day 10, crew gets a break to get some off-duty time. We do have a high-def TV crew news conference, and we'll also be performing an orbit adjust burn for MMOD mitigation. Basically, our current plan is that we're going to wait until the late inspection results are in, and once they come in, we'll go ahead and do the orbit adjust. And the reason why we're waiting until then at this point in time is that if for some reason, low probability reason, that we needed to do a launch on need, if we keep it in the 300 and 300 altitude that the 125 is, it makes the 400 rendezvous that much easier. And also, we'll talk about it later, but we have, when we're connected to each orbiters with the RMS. It's just less drag on both vehicles to ensure that we have good stability with the RMS grappled on the 125 vehicle. Flight day 11 activities, the standard end of mission -1 activities, entry prep, cabin stow, FCS checkout, RCS hot fire. We'll have a deorbit briefing, and of course we'll be having their last PAO event in high-def TV, and then we'll close this out with a KU stow. So if we can go ahead and get a video 21, just a quick clip of the STS-115 FCS checkout. Give you a break from looking at me. Of course, my last day would have been is flight day 10, so I'll be watching these last 2 days very anxiously. Flight day 12, deorbit day. Crew will be doing the deorbit preps and landing, and if we can get video 22, please. Here's STS-109 footage of the crew getting ready for entry. You can see here's actual entry of 109 via the HUD. Scooter gets to land at night again. He's excited about that. See, and of course, once the crew returns safely at KSC, there'll be much celebrating by a lot of folks, and we're looking forward to that. Next thing I wanted to talk about, just a quick overview of the STS-400 contingency operations, the launch on need. If I can get still 25. The crew that'll be supporting this is, they'll look familiar to you, it's the STS-123 crew, and you can see Dom, Box Johnson, Bob Benkin, and Mike Foreman. They're the folks that'll be training for that. I'll just give you a quick mission overview. What we'll be doing is flight day 1 is the rendezvous and tools checkout. We plan on doing a flight day 2 rendezvous and grapple with Atlantis, with the RMS. If I can get still 26, please. This is kind of what the grapple will look at. You see standard R-bar approach, and the 400 vehicle will grapple onto Atlantis. If I can have still 27. This is basically the attitude hold position that we'll have with Endeavor controlling the attitude control. You can see this helps out. We have the 125 vehicle and the velocity vector as a RAM to help us with the MMOD. See, EVA 1, if I can get, what we'll do, as soon as we get grappled the next day, we'll be starting the first of 3 EVAs. So on flight day 3, we'll have EVA 1, and if I can go ahead and get still 28, that's it. Okay, basically here's the 125 crew. We're of course starting over on the Atlantis vehicle. If I can get the next still, please. After for the first EVA, we'll be having Megan and Drew and John translating over into the 400 vehicle. Next chart, please. You can see here what we tried to show here is that both Megan and Drew will be staying over on our permanent 400 crew members, I should say, here. And we have John over there by the airlock. He'll be staying the night over on Endeavor, but the next day he'll be participating in EVA number 2. So if I can have the next chart, please. EVA number 2 will have John, Ray J, and Massimino participating in that. Next chart, please. You can see after the EVA, John will be a permanent member of the 400 crew, and then Ray J will be also. We have Scooter, Bueno, and Mass remaining over the 125, and this is after EVA 2, same day on flight day 4. So if we can continue the next chart, we're doing 2 EVAs on flight day 4. You see both Scooter and Bueno and Mass will be translating over to the 400 vehicle. Next chart. And at this point in time, all the 125 crew will be over on the 400 vehicle. And right after this is complete on flight day 4, we'll be going ahead and separating from the 125 vehicle. See, why don't we go ahead and go to still 29. Basically, just as a quick overview of the mid-deck seating where all the 125 crew will be. 400 guys get the box seats up top, and these guys have to hang out in the mid-deck. Just quickly, wanted to give you an overview of what the disposal plan is on 125. And we did a lot of work prior to return to flight. Actually, I led the team to do this, but we came up with the unmanned undocking sequence. Basically, we're going to kind of do the same thing. It's basically simplified. Once we separate, or once we get released from the 400, we'll just basically send commands up from the ground, maneuver to deorbit attitude, go ahead and load the targets, and do the deorbit from there. Right now, the plan impact area would be north of the Hawaiian Islands. It's the best place. That's the first place they've been looking at. There's other options, but that's what we're looking at right now. See, and that's all I have for you guys today. Again, I'm really excited to be here, not at the press conference, but to be this close to flight. We're a month away. The team's ready. I have high confidence that everyone's prepared to do this, and you know, it's that waiting game that we always get into a month before flight. But if we can launch tomorrow, my team is ready to do it, and I know the Hubble guys are. Of course, got to get the payload. It's over to the pad, but we're ready. We're excited. We know it's a challenge, but we've done planning and such that we know that we can overcome the challenge, and we're looking forward to a very successful flight. And with that, I'll hand it back to you, Kyle.
Okay, great. We're ready for questions here. We have a number of reporters here, so if you can limit it maybe to one question, we'll try to get around twice and check with the other NASA centers. Jeremiah, we'll start on this side. You want to start with Tracy, and then we'll work our way across. Go ahead, Tracy.
Tracy Watson, USA Today. Can you talk about why you have so many crew members with so much Hubble experience? What about this flight made you decide that you want to have so many repeat Hubble flyers?
You know, I wish I could say I was part of the decision to pick the crew, but my guess is that because of being the last shuttle mission to the HST, servicing mission to the HST, we just wanted to make sure that we had the experienced folks to do that. These guys, you know, even though we have 4 first-timers, I have high confidence in those guys. But they looked at it, hey, Scooter's gone before, John has gone before, and Mass has gone before, and as long as we have some veterans, you know, we do that kind of standardly even for some ISS flights where we go through and make sure we have experienced folks to go along with the first-time flyers. Not any different here.
Mark?
Mark Carreau from the Houston Chronicle. Could you sort of review for us the power constraints on Atlantis and how long it can stay in orbit for this mission or the rescue? What are the scenarios that could play out, and sort of the longest you could keep Atlantis on orbit if you had to, and what do you sort of expect to happen even if you had something late that you found in the mission, like in late inspection, and how long you could sort of play out the dwell time until you could launch the rescue mission?
All right. I know John handed this over to me from yesterday, so I'll try to. You know, like he said, it all depends on when you declare the launch on need. If you declare it early on flight day 2, you know, we're doing the flight day 2 inspection, and we see something that we've never seen before and it looks unrepairable. If you go ahead and do launch on need at that point in time, you can get out at flight day 2, you can get out to between 18 and 25 days. 18 is if you go to the modified Group C, and with that you retain entry capability throughout that entire time. If you want to buy the additional 7 days, we have a power down, which we call the Group C Plus. And basically what you do there, you power down to very low levels around 8 kW, and you lose entry capability because you power off the APU, hydraulics, and hydrazine heaters. So everything freezes. So that's the maximum range, assuming that you do that on flight day 2. Let's go to the minimum capabilities. Flight day 10, here we are, everything's going smooth. We did late inspection, and we found something that we've never seen before, and we don't think it's repairable. Well, if we go to if we declare launch on need around 1817 MET, and again, you know, these are all assessments that I've done and assumptions, you know, things could change, but, you know, we had to start someplace. You can get out to around 16, this is 125 MET, about 16 days, 12 hours, 30 minutes. So if you work that on, you know, the launch on need to T0 right now is around 6 days, and then doing a Flight Day 2 rendezvous is 23 hours, so 6 days, 23 hours. So you add that all up, you can get grappled, rendezvous and grappled to the 125 vehicle at around 15 days, 11 hours, if I remember correctly. So I'll have to get the exacts. I was looking at it this morning. But you do have about a day margin. But if you look at the 400 EVA plan, you need about 2 days to get the EVAs as scheduled. You can accelerate the EVAs and do them all end to end and get them done in about 19 hours, which you'll barely have the margin to get it. But we have the margin to get there. And I feel, you look at this as a last need, ditch effort, what you need to do. So we have the capability on Flight Day 10 if we win LON to meet it. And I know there's a programmatic discussions on whether we want to, how much earlier we want, or if we want to start getting the 400 vehicle ready before that time. But I'm sure we'll talk about a little bit of that at the FRR. But the bottom line is that we can support Flight Day 10 launch on need declaration with little margin.
Robert Perlman with Collect Space. You mentioned briefly the IMAX camera in the payload bay. Does the crew have an IMAX camera also on board in the middeck, and is that Ray J's responsibility, the control of the one in the payload bay?
No, we don't have an IMAX on in the middeck because it just took up so much space. We had to, for this flight, we were space constraint because we did have to manifest the consumables and such for the LON declaration stay of 25, so we have a lot of LIO in there, food, extra clothes and such. But we didn't manifest one in the middeck. Of course, there's one on the OR UC, and Ray J is the one that'll be doing most of the photos. He has of course, IMAX folks gave him a detailed list of what to look at for all the different days, different activities, and he'll be taking photos of all that. If I remember correctly, there's only about 8+ minutes of actual film on there, so they'll be taking them sparingly.
Thank you. Tarek Malik with Space.com and Space News. Tony, I was wondering what the dialogue will be like between you and Paul during the mission until you get to the point where you know for sure you don't need a launch on need. I guess, how do you communicate with him to know where you are?
Everybody will know about it. Actually, Paul's work, like I said, he'll be working Orbit 3. So whenever, and we'll be pressing along like a nominal mission until the MMT says, by the way, LON is declared. So what we'll do at that point in time is that for the 125 flight, we'll reduce down to 2 teams, 2 shifts, 13 hours each, and we'll stay over in the white Ficker until we deploy HST. And of course, it all depends on when a launch on need is. If it's Flight Day 2, of course, we haven't even rendezvoused with it yet. But we'll move over to the red Ficker, and then the 400 team will come over to the white Ficker and get prepped and ready for the launch. So, yeah, everyone will know what's going on and what we'll be doing.
Irene Klotz with Reuters. Do you have any hard numbers about the chances of actually needing a launch on the rescue mission?
I don't. I know that John talked about some yesterday, but myself, I let those guys work that, and I focus on if we ever have to get into that, what we need to do, and making sure we're prepared for it.
Gina Sinceri, ABC News. I know you've really trained with the crew as well. You went to Alaska with them. You've done POGO training with them. What does that add during a mission, or how does that help you during a mission? I've seen you practice inserting. What does that mean to you when you actually get there?
It's kind of like, you realize how difficult these tasks are. You think that just because you're in 0G and nothing weighs anything, you still have this, mass handling you have to do, and how deliberate and such you have to be. Another thing that, you talk about, I also go to the different, we showed the crew doing the rendezvous training. I go with them when they do that too, so I can, we have dialogue then, and hey, Scooter, what do you think, and what do you guys, so that if we ever got into that same thing during the flight, we're on the same page. Okay. All right. And so it's a big benefit. And the Knowles thing was a lot of hard work. It was just not being in Alaska and doing all that fun stuff. It was hard work. So, but did I answer your question? Okay.
Kate, you had a question? Bill.
Bill Horowitz, CBS. About the Group C plus power down. If you get into an FT Flight Day 10 scenario, as you discussed, I assume then you're into the Group C plus power down.
Yes,
and
sir.
if it's Group C plus, you're not able to re-enter the orbiter. It's natural decay for that thing to come in. Is that what you were saying?
Actually, you can't do nominal entry as you would. There's discussion about, trying to enter it, but you can't. What you do is you freeze the hydraulics and you freeze. So basically, you don't have entry control. So what we would do, the only thing we can do with that is a disposal, where we go ahead, like I talked about, and do this. Go ahead and do a disposal burn, point the payload bay into the velocity vector, and just increases chances of breaking up.
You can target where it goes.
Yes, we can, and that's what we'll plan on doing, Bill. Like I said, the footprint we'll target to the orbit burn where we want the footprint to be.
Todd Alberson of Florida Today. I was just wondering if you could elaborate on how you and the STS-400 flight control team will operate given a STS-400 scenario. In other words, you guys go to the red picker and are on standby or in support, or how does your team integrate with Paul Dye's team if, in fact, a launch on need is declared?
Well, first thing of course, the Group C plus power down, where we have it planned right now, basically we only get downlink from the crew a couple, 3 hours a day. So we won't have to be watching them continuously. But of course, I'll be over there, and if we ever had in that scenario. But what we do is we would plan on, while we're doing the launch on need readiness, we'll be giving the crew updates each day, how things are going, such like that. Double check the systems and then get any input from them on what they're going on. And of course, once we get into rendezvous, we'll have the vehicle powered up, full power, full comm and all that, and we'll be saying, and there's a timeline that we'll be including in the 125 rendezvous book that has the entire 400 rendezvous. So the 125 crew will be following that along with the 400 crew. So we'll be we'll be talking to them on, we have the we have the two strings for the air to grounds. We'll be on. We're going to go ahead and put the 125 vehicle to the high sync mode. I can't remember the exact thing now, but in that way we'll have comm with them via the second string of air to grounds, and then of course the STS-400 vehicle will have the standard comm via the standard assets and such. So we'll be able to talk to them. Our plan is, of course, we'll be setting up the space-to-space radio that when we do the rendezvous, that the crews will be able to talk to each other through that. And then we'll go ahead and once we get grappled and get all that set up, as far as the EVAs, we'll both, since we're doing all the airlock depresses and such, most of them out of the 125 vehicle, our team will be on working with Paul saying, all right, we see this, double check, okay, we're ready to go, we see a good, so we'll be all in sync on what we need to do on that.
Okay, we'll come back here for some follow-ups after we go around to some of the other centers. Let's start with NASA headquarters in Washington, D.C.
This is Seth Borenstein from the Associated Press. Can you go into that rapid response EVA, especially how, if you have MMOD damage that you've noticed near the end of the mission, who does what, and how long do you have, and if you find it earlier, does it impinge on EVA number 5? Thanks.
No, we'll have to deconflict. The rapid response EVA was basically for deploy day contingencies. So on flight day 9, we'll have the crew prepped up to prior to donning their EMUs, so that as we go through the deploy prep, we go ahead and we grapple, we disconnect the umbilical, we go ahead and unlatch the berthing latches, and then we go ahead and go to the berthing attitude. Then we do the aperture door. So there's 4 items right there that we may or may not have to do an EVA for, and then last but not least, the RMS releasing. If it doesn't release, we have an EVA for that. So there's different milestones that we go through when we check off to say, all right, we don't have to worry about that, we don't have to worry about that, we don't have to worry about that. So that's the rapid response EVA on flight day 9. As far as late inspection and if there was damage and we did do a repair, the 11+2 mission that we have will support doing a repair post late inspection. All the crews are right now. All crews are trained to do TPS repair, so it depends on who they choose to do it. All of them are equally. Again, Gina said I've been through all the classes with them, and they're all equally prepared to do the thing. So it all depends who's feeling well, and And I won't speculate who I think it is, but we'll pick the right guys to make sure we do it. That answer your question?
Okay, we're off to, I think it did. Obviously.
Okay.
We're off to the Beltway Goddard Space Flight Center for questions there.
Hi, this is Alan Boyle with MSNBC. I wanted to ask about that decision to go with the repair versus having to do a launch on need. Have you gotten any sort of feedback from the crew, or how much input will, obviously the crew is going to have a lot of input into it, but can you just discuss how that process works and how the crew is thinking about this, any sorts of things that they've come up in the process of preparing for this that have helped modify the process?
Well, you know, the crew will be more focused on if we have to do a repair, we know how to do it, and they've been trained for it. You know, just like most of the decisions to do the repair or not will be made by the mission management team. You know, we go through that after the Flight Day 2 imagery review, and you know, this be the same process but accelerated. And it's not like you know, all of a sudden in the middle of Flight Day 10 that we're going to know we have to do a repair. You know, as the debris assessment team goes through and looks at the imagery data that we'll get it all done prior to sleep on Flight Day 9. So as they go through their data and they identify something, they'll give everybody a heads up that, hey, we see something that we're concerned about. So the flight control team and the mission management team will be aware, you know, as soon as they find something, and then that'll be kicking off the process to say, does this need to be repaired or not? So it'll be accelerated because we don't have the additional days. But the plan would be, you know, we do the late inspection, the next day is off duty and such. Well, if we find that we have to do a repair, then we'll still do, the next day is Flight Day 11, we'll still do the end of mission -1 activities, FCS checkout, RCS hot fire, and then do EVA prep that day, just to allow the teams on the ground to get a repair procedure put together. And then we'll do the repair the next day and then deorbit the next day. So that's how it'll work out. But the crew will focus more on what they need to do with the repair, and we'll give them a heads up of, hey, we're looking at just NOACs, dabbing NOACs on it, or, you know, having to do a plug. So that's where we'll be with that.
Okay, down to the launch site, the Kennedy Space Center in Florida for a couple of questions, then we'll come back here.
Marcia Dunn, Associated Press. I'm wondering if there's anywhere on the shuttle that the inspection boom cannot reach. Is it going to be 100% coverage for the scans, 95? And given that there are no ET photos coming back on this flight because of the darkness and no RMS, I'm just wondering if this flight in particular, given all that and potential lack of full coverage by the inspection boom, is this mission at additional risk of missing a potential problem from debris or MMOD?
Well, see, Marcia, the handheld videos that the crew takes will we not be able to get, but you know, the umbilical cameras do have flashes on them, so we'll be getting data from that. And as far as the coverage, we've covered every piece of TPS as well as the RPM. You know, the things that we haven't, of course, we can't get and we haven't looked at, and we talked to the engineering guys about this, and they said it wasn't required, was, you know, the engine bells and, you know, above and beyond the body flaps and all that. And we discussed that with them, and they feel confident that that's not required. That's nice to have on the RPM. You know, originally it wasn't even part of the RPM photography. But as part of our standard TPS inspections, we've covered every critical piece of TPS and within the detection resolution requirements. So we feel very confident and don't see any additional risk with missing those couple bell areas and such.
Thank you. And I know you're taking extra supplies and everything up, but what's the first thing that will run out if you get into a situation with Atlantis and the launch on need can't or doesn't get there? What's the first thing to go? What's the most limiting consumable? The
cryogenics, though, too. So we'll run out of fuel to run the fuel cells, and of course for the crew to breathe. So that'll be the limiting consumable.
Okay, we're back here. We'll make one more trip around. Let's start back here with Jim. He didn't ask a question on the first round.
I know having 2 missions that you're preparing to launch instead of 1, it's not twice as hard because the second one's simpler, but it's not free either. Can you give a swag as to how much extra effort your team, training is done, planning is done, to have 2 separate missions in preparation simultaneously with a near simultaneous launch dates? How much extra work has that been on your people?
Well, I would look at it, Jim, it'd be like getting required for an additional flight. But you don't have a lot of mission content as where we spend 80% of our time making sure that all goes. But it was a standard design process for the 400. And one of the good things, of course, is that you use 125s and just move that over to 400, all the standard design in that. So it was simplistic in that way. But I would say, just like a same flight, but with same getting ready for a flight, but reduction of being that there wasn't detailed mission content in it. That, we spent a lot of our time making sure that that all gets safely. The big thing was the EVA, and we've gone through that with a fine-tooth comb. And one of the things that I forgot to mention, and I know I'm not supposed to offer up information, but the 125, the 125 crews will be doing all the EVAs. The 400 crew is not, the only EVAs that they're trained to do is any orbiter contingency ones. But the 125 crew will be the ones that do it. And you saw that in the, and I failed to mention that, but you saw that in the charts. So they'll be the ones as soon as we be doing all the EVAs and stuff.
You could take 25% more work, 50% more work.
How about 25? Is that a good number?
Tracy.
In the EVA scheme for STS-125, some of the crew members go back and forth a couple times. What's their role as they do that?
What they're doing is they're transferring over the EMUs. Because once we get used, when we fly up 400, we have 1 EMU on board, an extra large that Scooter needs because he's a big guy, and no other comment there. And but as we bring people over, we have to bring EMUs back over. So that's what they're doing. And also, 400 doesn't have all the TPS repair supplies, so we're also removing stuff from the TSAs, the tool stowage assemblies, and then we're bringing that over too to make sure we have a full complement of 400 repair tools.
Mark?
Mark Perot from the Houston Chronicle. I have kind of a double question here. Has the decision process for the launch on need been simulated at an MMT sort of level with the flight control team? And what is your sort of understanding of how the final decision would elevate? I know we asked this to John Shannon yesterday, but is there something written out in your rules that tells you it has to go up the chain of command and even up and out of the agency to the White House or something like that?
Let's see. To answer your first question, we've kind of talked through this scenario through an MMT sim we had a couple weeks ago, where we actually had a repair. So then we went through the standard process. Well, how confident are we in the repair? When should we start getting LON kicked off? So we've already gone through that with the MMT mission management team. We've also, Paul and his folks have been doing 400 sims, standard rendezvous and such, so well prepared for that. And I've been part of those, just from a bystander standpoint, just to make sure I understood what was all going on. And what you talked about as far as the process, I don't think it's any different than from ISS one, that it has to go through the various channels. And I know that Gersten Mario will have to approve it. And to be honest, just because it's an emergency, I'm sure that they'll have to inform the White House that indeed this is what we're doing. And
let's see, we only have time for a couple more questions, so we have a great deal of setup with show and tell for the next one. So we'll try and grab as many as we can here. Go ahead, Rob.
Robert Perlman with Collect Space. With regards to the LON mission, is there a scenario where early in the mission, if you were to detect, unlike with the Flight Day 2 inspections, that a LON is needed, that the HST mission would go forward, the servicing would go forward? Is there any scenario where you would continue to service while you prepared to launch on need?
Again, that'd be a discussion by the MMT team, because once we do the rendezvous and then we get HST berth, they're starting to use orbiter power. So it all, like we talked about from the Flight Day 2 scenario, you can get out to 25 days. We did look at some scenarios, repair scenarios that we went through, didn't really saw damage on flight day 2, but went ahead and got berthed, went ahead and did the first EVA, and then, like I said, we did focused inspection on flight day 5, and we said, oh, hey, we do need to get a repair. So all of a sudden, the HST guys at least got one EVA in, and the discussion would be, well, do we want to get the second EVA in to complete X task before we deploy, or do we want to deploy and ensure that we extend the on-orbit time as long as we can for the LON support. So it's a decision and where you're at and where you are as far as the LON readiness and all that.
Tarek.
Thank you. Tarek Malik with Space.com and Space News. And I may have missed this earlier, but if you do have to do a launch on need, would you ask for an RPM then of the 400?
No, we will. That's just we talked about that, but that again would have been a whole new procedures planning and all these different things. And since we had the flight day 2, since we designed the belly tile scan for the 125 mission, we'd use that same one on 400.
Thanks. Irene Klotz with Reuters. Tony, what gives you pause for thought about this mission? Like, what keeps you up about this?
Well, every time you have a space flight, you just make sure everything goes well. I mean, it's the standard. Nothing we're doing during the flight gives me any additional concern. It's just standard space flight where you're going from 0 to 17,000 miles an hour, and then you got to come back down and land. And I mean, that's the standard concerns that we always have. And then for the flight itself, going through the inspections, the EVAs, the rendezvous EVAs, and everything after that deploy, like I said, we've gone through that with a fine-tooth comb, and I feel very confident and have high confidence that we're well prepared for all that.
Gina. Gina Sinceri, ABC News. Why is Hubble worth this to you?
Myself, I step back, before, like I said, before 109, I wasn't really a Hubble hugger or anything like that. But the more I got involved with this and the more I understood what benefits we were getting from this, everyone, you can trade all these different things off, but you just see the pictures in themselves. It's unbelievable what they're showing. And then when you have somebody like Dave LaCrone and John Grunsfeld explaining to you what those pictures are telling you and how they can determine age and all that, it just blows your mind, and it's just amazing. And what this telescope can provide, I think maybe Dave said it yesterday in his conference, every history book has this in it. And it's just amazing. And to me, I would take the opportunity and I would take the risk, and I would sit right next with Scooter and those guys to go fix this thing. They made a decision to do it, and NASA has made a decision to do it, and I would go sit with them. I wouldn't, I step back, and you guys have heard me say this before, but I wouldn't put the crew in any situation that I wouldn't do. And I think it's well worth going up there and fixing it and getting it to the best condition that we can, just because of what it provides to us. Okay.
Hi, it's Kate Tobin with CNN. Your 5 spacewalks are jam-packed. Do you have a strategy if things don't go well? Are there certain tasks that are higher priority than other tasks that might take precedence over things further down on the timeline if stuff doesn't work out the way you planned?
Yes, yes, and yes. We've, the Hubble guys, and my standard mode of operation is to what if a bunch of things to death. Some folks like that, some folks don't. But it's a follow-on from the previous Hubble flights where they said, here's our mission priorities. We also have defined this flight, what our minimal mission success is. So we have the tasks, and those get completed in the first 3 EVAs, and we have full mission success, and then of course we have all the 5 EVAs. But we have a detailed, we call it EVA replanning, in the flight rules that we go through, and that says, well, let's say if we lost a mission day or we lost EVA day due to tasks running long and stuff, we go through that and we start going, okay, here's what next day's EVA will consist of based on priorities and minimum mission success stuff. And the reason why we need that, like you said, we have 5 back-to-back EVAs. We don't have time and day in between to sit there and talk about what we need to do. And that's one of the things that when I first got, we first started working the mission, I told the Hubble guys, and I've been telling MMT guys that we don't have time to sit back and discuss everything we're going to do, because as soon as I get off console after the first EVA, within an hour, we're going to talk about what we're doing the next EVA, because the planning process kicks off then. Hopefully we don't have any changes. That would be great, and that'd be a really short planning process, but we have defined very specifically what our task would be. And we also have them define that if an instrument fails, we go through and we do a liveness test. And then if that's okay, they do a functional test overnight. Well, if the functional test doesn't work, we have identified in there that said, okay, for this EVA, it'll be nominal, but this will be a replan where we'll go ahead, like for the wide field camera. If wide field camera 3 didn't work, we'd wait till later EVA to go ahead and put wide field camera 2 back in, wide field planetary camera 2 back in. So we have a detailed matrix on what we want to do. And I'll have to admit, there are some unknowns. If we go, you try to go through every different condition, but now if you start having flight support system structures where you need to do contingency operations to get that prepped, that the EVA replanning now is it's a guideline, but by doing that, you provided yourself a philosophy that says, hey, you guys, let's not change the way we did the EVAs, how we went through the process and the sequence, because that in themselves, the crew knows this, knows that like the back of their hand, and it's second nature. When we start fiddling and moving things around, that's when you lose efficiency and you just get into trouble. And even if you got to the case where your second task on an EVA was higher relative priority than your first task, it'd be silly to switch the order because you're just losing efficiency. You have to replan, you have to do all the things. So, we have that as part of our philosophy for any of the things that we haven't specifically defined in the flight rules, but we have a pretty good plan together if anything goes off now.
Let's see, I've only got time for one more, I'm sorry, but we'll grab Bill and then we got to get out of this to set up for the next one.
Thanks. It's just a kind of a philosophical question about STS-400 and how to think about that. I mean, as I look at this, from what you guys tell me, the odds that you would actually need this flight, given the inspection stuff you have, the repair techniques you have, it's almost like the escape pole on the lower deck. Nobody can really think how you get in a situation where you need it. It's nice to have it, but you don't really think you'd ever need it. Is that how you look at 400? Is this something you feel like is critical to this mission, or do you really think you guys have the bases covered and this is in the nice-to-have category versus really required?
Myself, I think John Shannon said it yesterday. It wasn't free, but it was something that we could easily do. And to me, anything else you have in your toolbox that can help out and is not a big impact, we should go ahead and do it. Like he said yesterday, I don't think anybody expects us having to do this, but if for some unknown occurs, some low probability thing, we have it ready and we're prepared to go ahead and do it. So myself, I step back and look at all this stuff and I just say it was not free to the program, but it's there, it's ready. In the way the KSC guys in the shuttle program have gone through it, it's minimal impact to STS-126. So to me, again, it's almost free and it's the right thing to do.
Okay, that's all the time we have for this one. There's quite a bit of setup, show and tell for the next briefing. I think you'll be well entertained and informed by Tomas Gonzalez-Torres and his team, who are going to lead the spacewalk effort on this flight that Tony laid out for you. So stay tuned for that next on NASA TV. Thanks, Tony. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.